It was indeed not the time to fight among themselves. Several members endured the pain and burned the corpse. They put the ashes in a bag and took it away. When they went on the road again, their vigilance was high. After all, there was already a precedent. No matter how stupid they were, they wouldn't be as relaxed as before. Probably the killer in the dark also knew that they were vigilant. Until they reached the 5th floor. That thing didn't make any more moves. When they reached the 6th floor, they became even more vigilant. I originally wanted everyone to spread out and search for it. That way it would be faster. But now there's a monster hiding in the dark. I'm sure it's very fast and very lethal. So we can't spread out and let it kill us one by one. Lin Xiaofeng thought for a moment and then said, "Why don't we search together? Although it will be slower, at least it will be safer." Xiaoqing nodded. "Or we can split into 2 teams. That way it will be faster." "Let's go together. Safety first," Lin Xiaofeng said with some pain. "I don't want to sacrifice any more brothers." Xiaoqing nodded. "Then we will start from here and search along the corridor. We will only look for the room on one side. When we reach the end, we will go back and look for the room on the other side." Lin Xiaofeng said, "That's the safest way." "I agree. One more thing. Is there an earth ability user? The moment we open the door, we have to prevent something from jumping out. So, if there is an earth ability user with high defense to open the door, it will be safer." Xiaoqing was the first to say, "We don't have one here." "I am." The short guy who was kicked away by Yan Hanqing raised his hand and said, "I am a level 2 earth ability user. I have earth armor and earth shield. I will open the door." "Little Six, you do it." Lin Xiaofeng nodded. "Be careful." Little Six attached the earth armor to his body and condensed an earth shield in his hand. Then he went to open the first door on the left. Fortunately, after the first door was opened, nothing came out. However, they didn't let their guard down. Little Six was the first to enter the door, followed by Yan Hanqing, who had the thunder ability, and a fire ability user from the wind ability user team. Both of them were assault type. If they were in danger, they could quickly help Little Six. The rest of the team came in one after another. 3 people were left to guard the door, in case they were attacked from the front and back. However, there was nothing in the room. They searched around but found neither information nor zombies. They opened the second door in the same way. The room was also a mess. There were messy bloodstains on the floor, but there was no information or zombies. When they reached the end of the corridor, Little Six tried to open the door, but it was locked. They had encountered 2 rooms with locked doors before, but it wasn't a problem. Little Six moved aside slightly, then covered Gu Panpan with an earth shield. Gu Panpan took a deep breath and instantly turned into a King Kong Barbie. She kicked the door open. Yes, it was broken. Just as the door shattered, a black shadow pounced out. At this moment, Gu Panpan's reaction time was clear. She was very calm and unhurried. She firmly stomped her foot on the ground and then smashed her fist into the thing's head. Chapter 64. The punch was so solid that the zombie's head burst open, and its brains spilled all over the ground. Of course, that was not the point. The point was that the one who had launched the sneak attack had come out again. This time it had targeted Gu Chuan. Just as it was about to strike, Xiaoqing discovered it first. She quickly waved her vines and whipped it to the ground. Its body hit the ground with a loud noise. Everyone looked at the zombie. It quickly got up and tried to escape, but its lower body was bound by Xiaoqing's vines. It was a young zombie. It should be a male, but its face was rotten beyond recognition. Its hands were different from those of ordinary zombies. Its nails were extraordinarily long, as if its hands were full of sharp knives. It was probably the weapon that had torn open the throat of the Gale Paranormal. Kill it. Avenge our brother. The Fire Paranormal from the Gale Paranormal attacked without saying a word. Fortunately, Lin Xiaofeng was more rational. Don't be too impulsive. We have more people. We won't let it run away. Yes, don't use the fire ability. Burn the vines and it will run away. Xiaoqing tightened the vines and said coldly, "Those who don't use the wood ability, go first. Don't let it run away." Lin Xiaofeng nodded. This was also the first time Xiaoqing had seen Lin Xiaofeng's special ability. His special ability was also relatively rare. It allowed him to control metal. In his hands, metal could freely change into various shapes to be used in battle. As for Chang Jiao, she was also a very special paranormal. Her hair could quickly grow and become extraordinarily tough, just like Xiao Qing's vines, which could be used to bind others. The cooperation between Chang Jiao and Lin Xiaofeng was like that between Xiao Qing and Gu Panpan. One was controlling the other, and the other was attacking. They had a tacit understanding. The zombie was very fast, but it couldn't withstand the attacks of 7 or 8 people at the same time. It didn't even have time to react before it was buried in the colorful superpowers. When the light dissipated, only bones were left. Lin Xiaofeng's people breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the pleasure of revenge. The fire-powered paranormal, who hadn't been able to make a move, was so angry that he ran up to the zombie and turned it into ashes. After the group of people finished cleaning up this strange house, they went into the room to search. This room was filled with information, and it was very likely that this was the information room they were looking for. However, there was too much information in this room, and a lot of it was damaged by the zombie hiding in the room. Maybe this zombie was the administrator of the information room. When the apocalypse came, he became a zombie or was bitten, so he specially locked the door, not wanting to turn into a zombie and bite others. However, the documents in the house were all destroyed by the zombies. Xiao Qing and the others searched for a long time, and finally found an incomplete document about water purification. They were all stunned. What should they do with only half of the document? Moreover, it was badly damaged with a lot of blood and torn fragments. Ordinary people couldn't understand what it was. After a moment of silence, Chang Jiao suddenly said, "My brother is a civil servant. He once told me that there are at least 3 copies of important information. One is stored in the database on the computer, one is stored in a USB drive, and one is printed in paper. Should we go up and have a look?" Lin Xiaofeng asked. "Even if we go up and find the computer and the USB flash drive, there is no electricity. How can we find the information? How can we determine which USB flash drive the information is in?" Xiao Qing asked calmly. "There is a research room under the government building. Even if the power outside is cut off, the research room won't be cut off. We still have a chance." Chang Jiao gritted her teeth and said, "Since we are already here, we should at least do the task perfectly. Otherwise, it will be a waste of time." Xiao Qing was silent for a while, and then asked for Yan Hanqing's opinion. "Should we go to the basement?" "Let's go." Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan exchanged their opinions, and then said, "If we can really find the information and the method to purify the water, it will be good for us." Xiao Qing then looked at Lin Xiaofeng. Lin Xiaofeng was silent for a while, and then said, "Sorry, I want to take my brothers out first." He knew that it was unkind of him to do this, but it was true. If they lost any more members, the Gale Squad would suffer a great loss. Although he kept saying that he would replace all the members when he returned, in fact, he hoped more than anyone that none of his members would stay here forever. They could go back and submit the information, and he didn't want to take any more risks. Cheng Jiao's eyes widened. She wanted to say something, but after a while, she still didn't say anything. Finally, she lowered her head. "Then you guys go out and wait. I will take my team to go down and have a look. It would be best if there is electricity, but if not, we will just leave." Xiao Qing didn't complain. She just said lightly. She didn't want to be a saint. She just wanted the environment to become better and better. At least, she wanted her son to have a better life in the future. After all, she wasn't the only one who benefited from this. Chapter 65. Feeling ashamed, Lin Xiaofeng left with his team members. The 2 teams separated on the first floor. Xiao Qing led her team members into the elevator. She never thought of herself as a good person. She even thought that she was cold-blooded and heartless, but she had her own bottom line. She had her own judgment on what should be done, what should not be done, what should not be done, what should not be done, and what should be done. Due to the lack of electricity, the elevator couldn't operate normally. There were no stairs to the basement, so they could only take the elevator. Gu Panpan violently destroyed the elevator, and the elevator inside screamed as it fell. Finally, it hit the ground with a loud bang. Xiao Qing wrapped the vines around the door handle not far away. In order to make sure that the vines would not break when they went down, Xiao Qing used several vines to make a very strong vine rope. To ensure safety, Xiaoqing was the first one to go down. She grabbed the vines and slowly climbed down the dark passage. At last, she landed on the wreckage of the elevator. The basement was particularly dark and gloomy. She frowned and took out some clothes from her space. Then she found an iron rod and wrapped the clothes around one end of the iron rod to make a simple torch. There was no one with firepower in their team. In order to make a fire, everyone would bring a lighter with them when they went out. Xiaoqing was no exception. She lit the torch with the lighter. When the light illuminated the area around her, she was startled. Next to her was a zombie that was beyond recognition. It was smashed under the wreckage of the elevator. Its body was broken at the waist. Its upper body was crawling on the ground, dragging long guts out. Anyone who saw this scene would be scared out of their wits. She mercifully freed the poor zombie, and then looked around. She didn't find any other zombies, so she pulled the vines, and the people above came down one after another. When everyone came down, Xiaoqing had already found the light switch. She pressed the switch, and a row of lights lit up one after another. The originally dark space instantly became as bright as day. It was so bright that it stung people's eyes. The entire basement wasn't big. There were only 2 rows of 8 rooms and an empty space. However, it was very messy. It was hard to tell what it used to be. It's better to be cautious. Let's start from the first room. Xiaoqing didn't dare to let her companions take the risk, so she used vines to open the door. The vines wriggled up the doorknob and twisted it open. Then the vines pushed the door open. The room was dark, and only the dusty floor could be seen from the part where the light shone in. The rest of the room was gloomy. Xiaoqing controlled the vines and groped around the wall. She found the switch and turned on the light. They didn't know whether it was luck or not. As soon as the light was turned on, they saw a lot of computers in the room. Who knows how to use computers? Xiaoqing went out first. She didn't find any danger, so she turned back and asked, "Me?" Guchuan came over and turned on the computer. "I learned programming in college." Several other people also helped to turn on the rest of the computers. The computers here had passwords. Guchuan tried and began to crack them. Xiaoqing didn't know how to do this, so she said, "You guys stay here. I'll go out and have a look." Xiaoqing didn't go far. She went out of the door and looked around. There were definitely zombies here. After all, there was no elevator. The mutated zombies couldn't leave. They must be hiding now. I can feel. Xiaoqing was looking around. Suddenly, a somewhat childish voice sounded in her mind. She was stunned. She looked back and saw Xiaotong standing at the door with a nervous expression. "Just now, sister." "It's me." Xiaotong's fingers were intertwined. She nervously drew circles on the ground with her toes. Her voice was thin and soft. It directly sounded in Xiaoqing's mind. "What's the matter?" Xiaoqing was very surprised. Xiaotong's eyes were bright. She was like a child who had just learned to speak. Her pronunciation was very unclear. Before breaking through learning, Xiaoqing almost understood. Xiaotong meant that when she broke through to the second level, she learned to convey her thoughts with her consciousness. This should be the unique ability of psychics. This ability may not be useful for others, but for Xiaotong who couldn't speak, it was the most useful ability. Xiaoqing was also very excited. Since the moment she brought Xiaotong home, she treated her as a family member. Otherwise, she wouldn't use Xiao as her surname. Now Xiaotong could use another way to do what she wanted but couldn't. Xiaoqing was also happy for her. "Sister." Xiaotong looked at Xiaoqing nervously and shyly. Her beautiful big eyes were shining. "I like you." Chapter 66. Xiaoqing blushed inexplicably. It felt good to be relied on and loved wholeheartedly. Of course, it had nothing to do with love. "Sister over there." Xiaotong turned her face to a corner. She was a psychic paranormal, so her perception was different from others. She could sense the abnormal spiritual waves in that corner. "Follow behind me. Be careful and guard against this." Xiaoqing touched her head and told Yan Hanqing and the others. Then she walked to the corner with only Air Dai and Xiaotong. When they reached the corner, even Xiaoqing was shocked. The ground was littered with corpses. All of them were mutilated corpses. Some of them had already mutated while others had already turned into zombies. All of them had died in this corner. In the corner there was a curled-up person, probably a human. Her body was covered with dirty blood, and her breathing was very weak. When Xiaoqing came over, the girl raised her head. The left side of her face was rotten and hideous, while the right side was as smooth as a freshly peeled egg. Her voice was hoarse and terrible. "A living person, who are you?" Xiaoqing frowned. She didn't feel any murderous intent from the girl. She paused for a long time and then said slowly, "You are not living person." "She is." Then she closed her mouth and didn't say anything. Xiaotong suddenly looked at the girl. They didn't say anything, but some slight energy waves rippled in the air. They were probably communicating with their minds. After a long time, the girl reached out and stuck her hand into her own chest. She pulled out a yellowish thing the size of an egg and handed it to Xiaotong. Her normal eye was suddenly filled with tears. She said softly, "The USB flash drive has a password. It's my birthday 199000613. If you enter the wrong password, the USB flash drive will format itself. Thank you." Xiaotong looked at Xiaoqing. She didn't say anything. Xiaoqing also understood. She took out a military knife and gave it to Xiaotong. Xiaotong personally freed the girl. After the girl stopped breathing completely, Xiaotong told Xiaoqing the whole story. The girl had a very special disease. Her eyes couldn't see the sun. Even if the cornea was replaced, it would be useless. Her father had been doing all kinds of research, hoping to cure her disease. Although the girl's eyes weren't good, she was a genius. For example, the water purification method was something she had researched. She had sent the information over just in time for the outbreak of the apocalypse. When they were in the basement, because all the researchers were physically weak, when the apocalypse broke out, all of them were infected by the zombie virus. Some became zombies in the early stages and some were bitten. Due to her high IQ, the girl awakened a psychic ability. However, she was bitten during the awakening process and turned into a half-human, half-zombie. She couldn't die or live even if she wanted to. Before those people became zombies, they begged her to end their lives so that they couldn't go out and hurt others. It was better to die than to become a walking dead who hurt their own kind. Therefore, she was left alone, struggling bitterly. The zombie that was smashed to death by the elevator wreckage was deliberately left behind. Firstly, it was too lonely to be alone. Secondly, it was a warning. If someone tried to take away all the information here, she would be able to find it. After everything was done, the girl sat in the corner. Her psychic ability could make her cells divide constantly, but they were constantly swallowed by the zombie virus. She could only feel her body being swallowed by the zombie virus little by little, and she was losing control of herself little by little, until Xiaoqing and the others came. Finally, she could be free. She didn't have to struggle in madness and despair every day and night. Death was a kind of relief. Xiaotong held the yellow thing and handed it to Xiaoqing. It should be something between an energy source and a zombie crystal. Xiaoqing shook his head. "She gave it to you. You can take it. I don't need it. When your level is higher, you can protect me. I meet her father in the future. I must tell him that she is living a good life." Hearing this, Xiaotong accepted it happily. Then she sent a message to Xiaoqing with sparkling eyes. Xiaoqing hung the special crystal on her neck with a vine twig, so that she could absorb it at any time. "I will remember it. If I have a chance to meet this girl's father in the future, I will tell him that I met this girl one day, and she is living a good life." After the girl's body was disposed of, Xiaoqing took Air Dai and Xiaotong back. When he got back, he saw several people working around the computer. "What's wrong?" "I found a document in the computer. I want to back up it with a USB flash drive, but the USB flash drive needs a password," Guchuan said with a headache. "The password is 199000613. There is a complete document in it. You can check it. If it is, we can go," Xiaoqing said in a low voice. Guchuan checked it and found a complete document in the USB flash drive. He couldn't help but be surprised. "How did you know?" Xiaoqing told them what had happened just now, and they all sighed. Since they got the document, they didn't need to find anything else. Following the method they used when they came, they let the vines climb up and find a place to fix it. Then Xiaoqing took the lead and climbed up first. Although there was light underground, it was full of the smell of blood, decay, gloominess, and mold. It was very depressing. As soon as they came out, they couldn't help but take a deep breath. Well, the task is done. Now we just need to go back and hand in the task. Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief. Let's go out and see if the storm squad is still there. They must have run away with the incomplete document. Gu Panpan couldn't help but say, what level 3 storm squad? They are just a group of shameless hooligans. Xiaoqing laughed as she walked out. Panpan, you're actually quite gentle. Look, you only know how to scold people with these few words. I will call them a group of idiots. Gu Panpan was not convinced. When they walked out of the door, they were all stunned. The ground was full of corpses, and they were all familiar corpses. The Storm Squad. Chapter 67. Xiao Lu's body was torn in half, and his internal organs were scattered all over the ground. The two halves of his body were badly mutilated. The chest of the fire ability user was torn open, revealing his broken bones and internal organs. The young man who was kicked away by Yan Hanqing was even more miserable. From his waist down, only his bones were left. Corpses lay on the ground one after another, and the only one alive was Lin Xiaofeng. His left arm was broken, and it hung limply on the ground. He lay on the ground covered in blood and was on the verge of death. When he saw Xiaoqing, he shouted hoarsely, Jiao Jiao. Jiao Jiao has been taken away. What was that? Xiaoqing calmly took out some medicine to stop the bleeding on Lin Xiaofeng's body. Lin Xiaofeng grabbed Xiaoqing's arm with his right hand that could still move and said anxiously, it's a mutated zombie. It's very strong and can tear a person in half. There's also a mutated zombie dog with it. Captain Xiao, please save Jiao Jiao. Xiaoqing was expressionless and he didn't want to help. He just slowly sprinkled medicine on Lin Xiaofeng. Lin Xiaofeng said anxiously, as long as you save Jiao Jiao, all the rewards of this mission will be yours. If you die here, the rewards will be ours when we go back, Xiaoqing said expressionlessly. Not only that, as long as you save Jiao Jiao, all my assets will be yours. Lin Xiaofeng's tears fell from the corners of his eyes. Not only his teammates, but he also thought too highly of himself. That was why he fell so heavily. Cheng Jiao was his childhood sweetheart, and also his lover. They had been together since the apocalypse, and they had supported each other. However, they fell in this place. His brothers were all dead, and even Cheng Jiao's fate was unknown. Why? Xiaoqing asked with confusion. I thought you would beg me to take you out of this city. After all, she was taken away by a zombie. Even if she didn't die, she would become a zombie. I love her. Lin Xiaofeng's glasses were nowhere to be seen. He clutched Xiaoqing's arm tightly, and his voice was extremely hoarse. Hanqing, you guys take Captain Lin to the car first. I'll look around and see if I can find Cheng Jiao. Xiaoqing let go of Lin Xiaofeng and prepared to check it out. She didn't think that Cheng Jiao was still alive. After all, not all zombies were like her and Dai, who caught a living person and kept them alive. She wanted to search around and let Lin Xiaofeng owe her a favor. If she could find Cheng Jiao's body and bring it back, it would be even better. She didn't let Lin Xiaofeng down. Dai followed Xiaoqing without hesitation. He had become Xiaoqing's little tail. Wherever Xiaoqing went, he had to follow. He didn't want to be separated from Xiaoqing for even a moment. Even if Xiaoqing disappeared from his sight for more than a certain amount of time, he would go crazy. Xiaoqing also knew Dai's habits, so she took Dai and went in the direction that Lin Xiaofeng said. Soon they found a clue because there were bloody dog paw prints on the ground. Xiaoqing and Dai started to search along the bloody dog paw prints. The dog paw prints finally stopped in front of a shop with a smashed glass door. Xiaoqing tentatively walked into the house. Once she reached the door, a zombie dog jumped out, bearing its fangs and dripping saliva mixed with blood. It wasn't very rotten. It stared at Xiaoqing fiercely. Dumbo Air quickly rushed up and fought with the zombie dog. The zombie dog had good strength and agility, but it was not as good as Dumbo Air. Soon it was beaten by Dumbo Air and lay on the ground crying. In the end, it was killed by Dai. After killing the zombie dog, the two of them walked in. As soon as they entered, they saw a shocking scene. Cheng Jiao, who was dying, was pushed against the wall by a tall zombie. Her shirt was torn and her pants were completely torn. Although they were blocked by the zombie's body and couldn't see what happened, Xiaoqing could guess. Chang Jiao's arms were broken, so she couldn't struggle at all. She stared at the ceiling blankly, and bright red blood kept flowing out of her lips. Seeing this scene, Xiaoqing felt that her hands were trembling. Chang Jiao was raped by a zombie, so she couldn't die even if she wanted to. She didn't think that it was risky to agree to Lin Xiaofeng's request to search for Chang Jiao. There was only one thought in her mind, which was to kill this special zombie. When the zombie heard the sound, it threw Chang Jiao aside and walked towards Xiaoqing with its swaying thing. It looked at Xiaoqing with a strange desire, which made Xiaoqing feel disgusted. Dai couldn't stand it either. He didn't know why he was angry, but he felt that his precious treasure was being violated by someone else. He rushed up quickly, and when he fought with the zombie, his first target was the zombie's lower body. In particular, that important part became the object of his attention. After being stepped on, the zombie went crazy. Before it could do anything to Dai, it was entangled by vines. However, this zombie was very strong, and the vines only restrained it for a second before it broke. However, there was an endless stream of vines that climbed up layer by layer. It didn't matter if the vines were broken, but when the old ones fell, new ones would immediately replace them. Before the zombies could fight back, they were beaten by Dumbo until they screamed miserably. In particular, a key part of their body was almost broken by Dumbo's stomp. However, it was a huge burden for Xiaoqing to use her superpower in such a reckless manner. Her face quickly turned pale, but she still gritted her teeth and continued to release vines to bind the zombie. That zombie was really tough. Dai tried for a long time, but couldn't leave any big scars on its body, let alone seriously injure it. Xiaoqing gradually calmed down. She was indeed a little impulsive just now. After calming down, Xiaoqing began to observe. She didn't believe that this zombie didn't have any weakness. The zombie's clothes were burned, which meant that fire didn't have any effect on it. Chang Jiao must have tried to bind this zombie when she was facing the fierce wind squad. Then she cooperated with Lin Xiaofeng to attack it, but it didn't work. Otherwise, the fierce wind squad wouldn't have been almost wiped out, and Chang Jiao wouldn't have been kidnapped and humiliated. Xiaoqing observed carefully. No matter what, she had to kill this zombie today, not only for Chang Jiao. Obviously, Chang Jiao wasn't the first victim. In a corner not far away, there were several naked female corpses. Although some of them were rotten, some were relatively new. It was obvious that they had been humiliated when they were alive, and there was a big hole in their stomachs. Even if it was for the good of the people, she was going to kill this zombie. Chapter 68. Xiaoqing's long and sharp nails were moving rhythmically. For the first time, she was multitasking. On one hand, she was using vines to bind the zombie. On the other hand, she was rushing forward. Together with Dai, they were fighting the zombie. During the fight, Xiaoqing had been constantly trying to attack the zombie's throat, head, and other vital points. However, she did not receive any ridicule. Until she attacked the zombie's eyes, the zombie dodged for the first time. Xiaoqing's eyes lit up. She and Dai began to attract the zombie's attention. Finally, when the zombie was busy running around, one of its eyes was poked blind. The huge zombie howled on the spot. Xiaoqing didn't even have time to breathe a sigh of relief before she heard a rustling sound coming from the surroundings. When she looked up, she saw 5 or 6 little zombies with umbilical cords around their bodies. They were like half-rotten monkeys crawling over. Their eyes were very big. When they stared at people, they looked very scary. They would only let out a strange cry. Xiaoqing suddenly understood why the female corpses in the corner had a huge hole in their stomachs. These monsters should have crawled out from their bodies. They all crawled out from the stomachs of the corpses. Why were they not as cute as her little bun? So it was better to die. The monkey-like baby zombies rushed over while crying. Then they were swallowed by the man-eating flower. The man-eating flower lazily stretched its huge leaves. It slapped a baby zombie that was trying to get close to Xiaoqing to the ground. Another one rushed over and was swallowed by the man-eating flower. It was not worried about indigestion at all. The man-eating flower had a very good appetite. It swallowed a few zombies in one bite. Once they entered the mouth of the man-eating flower, they were paralyzed by the venom secreted by the flower. Then they were quickly digested. The man-eating flower had not eaten so full for a long time. It was happy and twisted there. When the big zombie saw its last helpers being slapped on the ground like rubber balls and eaten one by one, it tried to run away. However, Xiaoqing's vines kept entangling it. When it was broken, new vines would replace it. The big zombie was about to go crazy. It opened its mouth and spat out a ball of fluffy things. When that thing came out, it drilled into Xiaoqing and Erdai's bodies. Although Xiaoqing was prepared, she still could not block it completely. She gritted her teeth and jumped on the zombie's back. At the same time, the vines crazily wrapped around it. Erdai also rushed over and hugged the zombie. Xiaoqing held the military knife and fiercely stabbed it into the zombie's eye socket. Stab after stab, black blood mixed with the ruptured eyeball sputtered out, causing the zombie to continuously howl as if it had gone crazy. Xiaoqing had already felt that something was growing and spreading in her body. It was the same feeling as if she had planted a seed in someone else's body. The moment it exploded, the body was full of plants. She knew that she could not waste a minute. She fiercely stabbed into the zombie's eye socket. The tip of the knife pierced through the back of the zombie's head. Again and again, the back of its head was poked into a hornet's nest. The last zombie was dead, but it was still fixed in place by the vines and Erdai. Xiaoqing stabbed it until its head was full of holes. Then Xiaoqing kicked its body away. She grabbed Erdai and stuck her hand into Erdai's abdomen. Erdai did not resist at all. It just stared at Xiaoqing with its big eyes and let Xiaoqing search inside its abdomen. Xiaoqing searched for a while and suddenly pulled her hand out. Then she pulled out a thin mass of daughter. This kind of plant was like a vine. It used a vine-like structure to climb on other plants. Then it would extend sharp thorns from the parts of the plant that were in contact with the plant. It would pierce the plant's epidermis and absorb nutrients for its own growth. In the end, the plant that it climbed on would gradually die due to lack of nutrients. Then it would look for other plants to climb on. In short, it was a very disgusting plant. After that mass of daughter was pulled out, more daughter started to grow in Erdai's body. Xiaoqing gritted her teeth. She cut a wound on her wrist with the military knife and stabbed it into Erdai's abdomen again. As expected, the seeds of the daughter climbed into Xiaoqing's body through the wound. Erdai suddenly grabbed Xiaoqing's arm and tried to pull it out. He should have sensed Xiaoqing's thoughts. Xiaoqing grabbed Erdai's hand and said, "Don't move. I have a wood power. I have a way to deal with them. Don't pull it. It hurts." Erdai froze. He didn't know what to do and didn't dare to move. It was as if he didn't notice that there was a hole in his abdomen. All he could think about was the wound on Xiaoqing's hand. When Erdai's body was clear of the daughter, Xiaoqing let out a sigh of relief. She pulled her hand out and pushed Erdai. "Go check on Chengjiao. I'll see if I can get rid of it." Erdai didn't move. He squatted down and looked at Xiaoqing without blinking. He was very stubborn, especially when it came to the issue of leaving Xiaoqing. He was as stubborn as a bull. Even Xiaoqing couldn't persuade him. Xiaoqing had to give up. She endured the pain of her internal organs being pierced by the daughter. She started to communicate with the daughter with her wood power. These daughters had lost their master, so they multiplied and grew without any scruples. Xiaoqing's wood elemental energy was loved by all plants in the world, and the daughters were no exception. At the very beginning, they tentatively came in contact with the wood elemental energy, then began to unscrupulously extend their bodies towards the wood elemental energy. When they had almost wrapped the wood power into a ball, Xiaoqing activated her power again. She wrapped a ball of energy around the daughter and attacked it from the inside. Xiaoqing wanted to get rid of the daughter directly. However, she found that they were very stubborn. They kept growing and multiplying. At this rate, it would take Xiaoqing about a month to get rid of them. In the end, Xiaoqing gave up. She directly tamed the daughter. After all, she hadn't found a third mutant plant after upgrading. Although the daughter didn't have much effect on zombies, it was very useful against humans. 1 or 2 daughter seeds were too small. People wouldn't be able to find them if they didn't know about their existence. It was a must-have for traveling and killing people. After taming the daughter, Xiaoqing's face was terribly pale. She walked to Chengjiao. Chengjiao had already used her broken right hand to put her left hand back to its original position. The clicking sounds were particularly frightening. "Are you okay?" Xiaoqing asked softly. Cheng Jiao's voice was hoarse. Lend me a knife. Chapter 69. Xiaoqing didn't say anything and silently carried Cheng Jiao back. When they got back, Cheng Jiao was already asleep. Lin Xiaofeng had been holding on until he saw Xiaoqing carrying Cheng Jiao back. Then he closed his eyes to rest. He was already at his limit and had been holding on. When Lin Xiaofeng woke up, he found that his car was shaking. When he turned his head, he could see Cheng Jiao's pale face and her bandaged stomach. He didn't see any big wounds on her body. He relaxed immediately and the wounds all over his body started to hurt. Xiaoqing was sitting in front of them. Hearing the sound, she turned her head. Don't worry. Her body is seriously injured and she's mentally exhausted. I gave her some sleeping pills and let her sleep a little longer. Thank you. Lin Xiaofeng said sincerely. Xiaoqing curled her lips slightly and said with a little evil tone, You really love her? She and I were childhood sweethearts. We grew up together. Many people say that two childhood sweethearts can't fall in love with each other because they are too familiar with each other. But I'm different from Cheng Jiao. I love her very much and she loves me very much. After this kind of relationship settled down, it became like family. Lin Xiaofeng laughed self-deprecatingly. I treat her as my lover, but I also treat her like a sister. I can't protect her. Do you know what happened to her before? Xiaoqing looked Lin Xiaofeng up and down and said with a faint smile. Hearing this, Lin Xiaofeng's face paled a lot. But soon he became determined. No matter what happened to her, it's all in the past. I will comfort her and heal her inner wounds. Xiaoqing didn't say anything else. She turned around lazily with her back facing Lin Xiaofeng. Don't forget your previous promise. Don't worry. Lin Xiaofeng moved his body and pulled Cheng Jiao into his arms. Their relationship was already very complicated. There were elements of love, family, and it was hard to let go of each other. The more complicated the relationship, the more sincere and solid it was. Cheng Jiao woke up at dinner time. Because of her injuries, she had been drinking soup, steamed buns and minced meat. During dinner time, Cheng Jiao was very calm. She and Lin Xiaofeng were in the same tent. Xiaoqing knew that she would tell Lin Xiaofeng everything. Then Xiaoqing also entered the tent. Once in the tent, Xiaoqing found Erdai sitting in the tent with his pants down to his knees. He lowered his head and looked at the area between his legs seriously. However, zombies really didn't have that kind of ability, except for the mutated zombie today. Xiaoqing looked at Dai's round and white exposed. He couldn't help but kick him. What are you doing? Luckily, Xiaotong is not here. Erdai felt wronged. He pulled Xiaoqing's hand and touched it. Then, his hand was slapped away by Xiaoqing. Erdai felt wronged. He stared at Xiaoqing as if to ask why he couldn't do what the tall zombie could do. Erdai vaguely knew that what he saw before was the most intimate thing between a man and a woman. Subconsciously, he also wanted to do that with Xiaoqing. Unfortunately, his body wasn't strong enough. Xiaoqing pinched Erdai's inner thigh and said coldly, Go to sleep or I'll chop it off. Erdai immediately clamped his thighs and became very obedient. Xiaoqing pulled up his pants and sighed. It's okay if you're at home, but don't take off your pants casually outside. It won't be good if other people see it. Erdai nodded confusedly and cooperated with Xiaoqing to pull up his pants. Xiaoqing sometimes felt that Erdai was a very possessive brat. However, he was also very strong. Don't sleep tonight. Absorb it and see if you can break through. Xiaoqing stuffed a few high-level zombie crystal nuclei into Dumbo's hands. She didn't notice that there was a crystal nucleus of the zombie she had just killed today. Erdai was also obedient. He put all the nuclei in the small pouch that Xiaoqing gave him a long time ago. Then he took them out one by one to absorb them. When Xiaotong came in with Little Bun, the family of 4 each took a nuclei and started to absorb them. The higher the level, the more energy they needed. Take Xiaoqing as an example. She was now at level 3. Absorbing level 1 zombie nuclei was almost useless to her. Level 2 zombie nuclei weren't very useful to her either. Only level 3 to level 4 nuclei were suitable for her to absorb. Low-level nuclei were useless. High-level nuclei couldn't be used. Level 3 or 4 nuclei were more suitable for her. However, level 3 or 4 zombie nuclei weren't easy to find. She only had one level for zombie nuclei. She still had a few level 3 nuclei. As for the level 4 one, she planned to absorb it when she returned to the base and was safe. For now, she just needed to absorb level 2 or 3 nuclei. The next morning when they were ready to leave, Xiaoqing looked at Lin Xiaofeng's expression. She didn't find anything strange. Not all men could accept that their lover was raped. Some men would even push the blame to the woman. Even some people were like that. When a woman was raped, it must be because the woman was usually flirtatious, or came into contact with some hooligans, or went to some places that she shouldn't have. In short, it was the woman's fault. Xiaoqing had seen a lot of such things. She felt that Lin Xiaofeng, who was so calm, was still a man. She could blackmail him less when they went back. His teammates were all dead. His wife was raped by zombies. He was also seriously injured. He was quite pitiful. Of course, he owed her everything. They went back much faster than when they came. Of course, they wanted to relax. After all, in this huge post-apocalyptic world, the base was considered safe. In the base, they didn't have to worry about being bitten by zombies when they woke up in the middle of the night. They could also rest and relax. When they returned to the base, they bumped into the higher-ups of other bases. Xiaoqing took them to hand in the mission. When they handed in the mission, the girl in the mission hall was stunned. A level 1 paranormal team with a terrible name completed a difficult mission without losing a single member. However, of the level 3 paranormal team, only the captain and vice captain were left. Wasn't this a miracle? All the rewards belonged to them. Lin Xiaofeng supported Cheng Jiao. He couldn't help but gasp when he spoke. The mission has been handed in. Captain Xiao, I'll take Jiao Jiao back first. I'll treat you to a meal next time. Xiaoqing watched Lin Xiaofeng leave. She was secretly happy. After all, they had been busy for so long. They had been on the verge of death several times. Finally, it was time to share the spoils. Just the reward points alone should be enough for their team to level up, right? Chapter 70. After a preliminary inspection, this is indeed the mission target's information. The information has been submitted to the higher-ups for review. The big-breasted girl sighed, but her actions were still quick. If the review passes, your baby Meng team will become a level 2 team. Please go to the wall over there to see the treatment of a level 2 team. The rest of the rewards will be calculated and distributed this afternoon. Please come and collect them in time. Okay. Xiaoqing was very relaxed physically and mentally. She let her teammates back. The information was quickly handed over to the higher-ups. The head of the base was called Hao Yun. When the news was handed over, he was receiving the higher-ups from the Jiangbei survivor base. As soon as he heard that the information was in his hands, Hao Yun was very happy. Immediately hand it over to the research department to see if it is complete. To be able to find this information in a city occupied by zombies, your base is really full of strong people. The head of the Jiangbei survivor base was called Yin Pingshen. He was a man who looked to be in his late 20s. He looked very gentle and gave off the feeling of a university professor. He had a good temperament. Even if he stood in a group of people, he would still be very eye-catching. However, compared with the man next to him, he was immediately inferior. The man next to him looked a little smaller than him. His skin was exceptionally white. It was so white that it was a little bit morbid. It was as if he had not seen the sun for a long time. His facial features were delicate, but he did not look feminine. His eyebrows were a little sharp. The 3 buttons on his collar were neatly buttoned. His sitting posture was also as straight as a pine tree. His whole person exuded a sense of abstinence. It made people want to tear his clothes and break his calmness. Is it about the research on water purification? The man's voice was also a little cold. It was very clear. It was easy to associate it with the crisp sound of jade beads hitting white porcelain. Hao Yun did not hide anything. He smiled and said, "Yes, that's the information. I originally wanted to wait for my researchers to develop the technology and then announce it to the major survival bases." Yin Pingshen could not help but sneer. When the time came, would he really be willing to announce it? He was afraid that he would only be willing to use this information in exchange for benefits. Although he was well aware of it, Yin Pingshen still complimented him. Major General Hao is really broad-minded. Hao Yun was making excuses over there, and it was really annoying to watch. The man next to her acted as if he didn't know about this. He asked straightforwardly, "Can I see the information?" The atmosphere immediately froze for a moment. After a while, Hao Yun laughed and said, "Of course, but we have to wait for our researchers to verify it. After all, the information has just been brought back, and we don't know if it's complete yet. Anyway, you will be staying at the base for a few days, so there's no rush." He nodded stiffly. After dinner, they returned to their resting area. Yan Pingshan said helplessly, "Shan, what did I tell you before we came? Don't talk." The man thought for a moment and then said with a serious face, "You actually told me not to speak?" Yan Pingshan was so angry that he wanted to laugh. "Do you know that I almost fell out with that narrow-minded Hao Yun today? You even told me not to speak." There was no expression on the man's face, but his eyes flashed with innocence. "You told me not to talk." Yan Pingshan was speechless. "I'm so angry because of you." "Sai, forget it. I've already said it." "That's it." Yan Pingshan waved his hand helplessly. At this time he didn't have any dignity to speak of. He carefully reminded, "Meng Shun, you must remember. When I don't tell you to speak, you must not speak." The man named Meng Shun nodded and then sat at the table without speaking. Yan Pingshan couldn't help but walk around. "We must get the information on the water purification. Otherwise, Hao Yun will definitely use it to threaten us in the future and gain some benefits. We can't do anything to Hao Yun. Maybe we can go and see the people who brought the information back? Maybe they have a backup." Meng Shun took a sip of water and looked at him without blinking. Yan Pingshan was in a bad mood. He slammed the table. "Why didn't you say a word when you should have spoken?" Meng Shun looked at the ripples in the cup and said slowly, "You didn't tell me to speak." Yan Pingshan was speechless. "I give up." Meng Shun paused for a moment and then said, "Oh." Yan Pingshan was completely worn out. He muttered to himself, "We should first check which team brought the information back. Then we can contact them in private." No, Hao Yun will be suspicious." Meng Shun slowly put down the teacup and said, "Baby Meng." "Baby Meng? Your cousin? Isn't he dead?" Yan Pingshan was stunned for a moment and didn't react. Meng Shun was also led astray by his thoughts. He said, "The team of ability users is called Baby Meng." Yan Pingshan finally reacted. He rolled his eyes without caring about his image. Why do they have such a name? This team leader must be a woman. Speaking of which, how did you know? When the girl came to deliver the information, I saw them. Baby Meng and Fierce Wind. Meng Shun said honestly, "It's easy now that we have a name." Yan Pingshan touched his chin. "Next we have to think about how to get close to them." While they were thinking about how to get close to them, the other side was dividing the loot. All the zombie crystals were poured out and piled up into a small hill 1 meter high. There was even a sharp point. Shao Qing divided all the crystal stones into 6 piles, 1 for each of them. You can keep them however you want. I heard that zombie nuclei have become the most common currency when I came back. No matter if it's between bases or between ordinary people, these nuclei are almost all used. You can absorb them or spend them. You can do whatever you want with them. No one declined. They all put away their share and went home to eat. In the afternoon, they still had to collect their spoils of war. At that time it would be time for them to split the loot. Shao Qing estimated that they would all become millionaires when they returned from this trip. After Yan Hanqing and the others went back to their room, Shao Qing brought the few brats into the room to eat. In the evening, she would try to absorb some of the level 4 zombie crystal to see if she could break through again. Even if she couldn't break through to level 4, she could at least improve her strength. It would be good for herself and the whole team. Chapter 71. The first day back in the base was the busiest. Sharing the loot took a lot of time. Lin Xiaofeng also sent people to deliver a lot of food and zombie crystals, not to mention other miscellaneous things. Lin Xiaofeng and Chang Jiao were both badly injured, so they couldn't come over. They sent people to tell Shao Qing that they owed her a favor, and that if she needed anything, she should tell him. As long as he could do it, he wouldn't refuse. When they were sharing the loot, Gu Panpan still didn't understand. Sister Qing, why did you save him at that time? I don't like the whole team. Pan, you need to think about the long term. Xiao Qing rubbed Gu Pan's head. If the fierce wind squad had all died there, our squad would really be the ones who stood out when we returned to the base, the kind that would soar into the sky. In the future, no other squad of ability users would dare to team up with us. They would think, if a level 1 ability user squad didn't suffer a single casualty while a level 3 ability user squad was completely wiped out, then what did this level 1 ability user squad rely on to come back alive? We have the strength. Gu Pan was very confused. They don't know. Xiao Qing chuckled and said, they will think that we climbed out of the base by stepping on Lin Xiaofeng's dead bodies. Of course, they will be wary of us in the future. Of course, the most important thing is that as the leader of a level 3 squad, Lin Xiaofeng must be filthy rich. You see, if he dies, how much can we take? If he's alive, we can take more. Gu Pan nodded with starry eyes and said, I understand, Sister Qing. Let's move everything back. Come to my place for dinner tonight. Xiao Qing patted Gu Pan and prepared to go out to see if there were any fresh vegetables and fruits. She wanted to exchange some for Gu Pan and the others. After all, the food they ate every day was not fresh after such a long trip outside. It was time to reward everyone's stomachs. The fruits and vegetables grown in the base were very expensive, but they were fresh and tasted good. Xiao Qing and the others were all tycoons now, so they naturally didn't care about such a small amount of crystal stones. However, before going to buy vegetables, Xiao Qing planned to go to the market to see if there were any good military knives that were sharp and easy to use. Xiao Tong would get one for self-defense. In this way, Xiao Qing would be more at ease when she went out in the future. Xiao Qing strolled around the market, but she couldn't find a suitable military knife. In the end, she settled for the next best thing and bought a decent dagger. This dagger was small and exquisite. Xiao Tong could go back and polish it so that it would be convenient for her to carry around. After buying the dagger, she was about to leave. When she turned around, she saw a lot of cosmetics on the stall opposite. She thought that Gu Pan was at the age where she loved to look beautiful. As for Xiao Tong, she would grow up soon. Should she buy some cosmetics and give them to them? In this day and age, it was already very difficult to survive. Who would still care about cosmetics? Therefore, these things were particularly worthless in the post-apocalyptic world. The total value of the cosmetics in this stall might not even be worth half a kilogram of food. Thinking that it was not expensive anyway, Xiao Qing walked over. As soon as she squatted down, a person squatted down next to her and picked up a small bag with dark seeds in it. How much is this? The stall owner glanced at that person and stretched out 2 fingers. That person nodded and took out 2 level 1 zombie crystals. Xiao Qing couldn't help but facepalm. Which family did this young master come from? It seemed that he was well protected in the post-apocalyptic world. How could he be so stupid? However, she didn't want to remind him. She would be hated for ruining other people's business. Besides, she didn't know this person. Mengshen gave the crystals to the stall owner. When he picked up the seeds, he was very happy. Most of the seeds were grain crops in the north. They were rarely seen in the south. Now that the post-apocalyptic climate was strange, he wanted to take them back and try planting them. If they could be planted, he could ask the base to buy a lot of seeds back. They would have enough to eat next year. Do you still have such seeds? Yes, of course. The stall owner was also overjoyed. His family grew these things, and he had left behind countless old seeds. Previously, he had been considering whether he should just eat them as food, but today he had actually gotten himself a sucker for a fool. Now, his head was full of 3 words: I'm rich. Can you take them all? If the quantity is not too much, I'll take them all. Mengshen turned over the seeds and crushed them. After the skin was broken, the white part exposed was very tender. When he pinched it, it felt moist. After paying attention to the soil and temperature, there should be no problem for them to germinate. The only thing to worry about was whether they could bear fruit. If he took more seeds back, he could test it a few more times. Xiao Qing looked at Mengshen as if she was looking at an idiot. His appearance was not bad, and his voice was also quite nice. It was a pity that there was something wrong with his brain. I'll go back and get them after I'm done. Xiao Qing picked 2 cosmetics and an eyebrow pencil. How much are these? The stall owner was probably addicted to scamming her, so he stretched out 2 fingers. Xiaoqing narrowed her eyes. Did he think that she was also a brainless idiot? How dare he try to scam her? Wasn't he a bit too bold? The stall owner looked at Xiaoqing's murderous eyes and suddenly realized that Xiaoqing was not Meng Shun. She was wearing the paranormal badge of the base. Because Xiaoqing was very beautiful, even for someone like him who put all his heart and soul into research, he could not help but take a few more glances at her. At the mention of shopping, Yan Pingshan's face darkened. He decisively stuffed the information into Meng Shun's hands and said, "Since you've seen her, then it's easy. Take the information and take a good look at it. I'll leave the matter of getting close to her to you." I heard that she's a widow. Meng Shun did not understand what Yan Pingshan was implying at all. When he was holding the information, he was still at a loss. Then Yan Pingshan ran away, leaving him standing there in a daze. After a long time, Meng Shun finally reacted. He opened the information and found the one with Xiaoqing's picture. Then he looked at Xiaoqing's information and slowly said, "Xiaoqing." Xiaoqing sneezed. Then she was surprised that as a zombie she actually had the prelude to a cold. Then she stuffed her son into Air Dai's arms and began to absorb the level 4 zombie nucleus. She removed all distracting thoughts from her mind and began to slowly absorb the energy from the zombie nuclei. The energy slowly flowed into her body. She could vaguely feel that after the energy had made a circle in her body, it would all enter her head, which was where the nucleus was located. Usually, when she used her superpower, the energy was released from the nucleus and then flowed around her body. Xiaoqing thought that it was probably because the nucleus absorbed the energy of other nuclei, and then it would slowly fill up. When it reached a certain level, the nucleus would be full, and then it would be upgraded. The nucleus would become bigger, and then it would hold more energy. The process of becoming stronger was to expand the size of the nucleus. The bigger the nucleus, the more energy it could hold, so it would be stronger. At least it should be like that for superpower people. As for zombies, they seem to be able to absorb energy from flesh and blood to evolve. Just like the variety of superpower people, zombies also had different variations. Similarly, both superpower people and zombies were constantly becoming stronger. Xiaoqing suddenly had an idea. What if she used the absorbed energy to strengthen her body? After all, every time when she was on the verge of upgrading, she would be stuck. There would be a long period of time when she was on the verge of a breakthrough, but she could not break through. At that time, would it be better to use the absorbed energy to strengthen her body? After all, when she was on the verge of a breakthrough, most of the absorbed energy couldn't be contained by the nucleus. It would either be used or scattered, which was very wasteful. Only a small part of it would be used to slowly expand the capacity of the nucleus. This idea went round and round in Xiaoqing's mind, and it kept tempting her. In the end, Xiaoqing decided to give it a try. She didn't use the level 4 nucleus stone, but took out a level 1 zombie nucleus stone. She tried to absorb it into her body, but the energy involuntarily circulated in her body, and then it entered the nucleus in her head. Xiaoqing tried several times, but the result was the same. The energy would enter the nucleus by itself. She suddenly felt a little discouraged. She even considered if she should first absorb the level 4 nucleus stone to see if she could reach the edge of a breakthrough, and then try again. Would it be easier that way? But she gave up and decided to try a few more times. After absorbing dozens of level 1 zombie nucleus stones, Xiaoqing had a little grasp of the rhythm. She thought for a moment. When the energy was transferred out of the nucleus, it would be obedient to her, but when it was just absorbed into her body, it was not obedient at all. The reason was very likely that after the energy entered her nucleus, it would be assimilated and then imprinted with her spirit mark. Spirit was an illusory thing. Only psychic paranormals like Xiao Tong could truly control it. Xiaoqing tried again and again but failed again and again. When the sky was about to turn white, she felt her spirit power for the first time. This was already a big progress. Xiaoqing breathed a sigh of relief. She took out the level 4 nucleus stone and absorbed it for a while, preparing to wait until night to fight again. Chapter 73. By the time Xiaoqing finished packing, it was already dawn. She yawned and prepared to set up her stall. She had harvested too many things in the past 2 days, so it was better to sell them. She would feel more at ease if she exchanged them for zombie nuclei. In addition, she was going to buy some higher-level zombie nuclei. Regardless of whether they came to sell or not, she would still get some. Anyway, she didn't lack food now, and there weren't many people in her family who ate food. She only had Xiao Tong and half a little bun, so she might as well use them to exchange for some nuclei. Xiao Qing first went to find Yan Hanqing and asked Yan Hanqing to take care of her family. Then she went to set up her stall. The good spots in the stall had been taken by others. Xiao Qing didn't mind. She found a corner, set up her stall, and began to absorb the crystals and improve her spiritual power. When it was almost noon, Xiao Qing suddenly noticed that someone stopped in front of her stall. Xiao Qing opened her eyes and found that the person squatting in front of her stall was none other than the stupid rich guy she met yesterday. Xiao Qing immediately perked up, and 4 words immediately appeared in her mind. Too much money makes people stupid. Thinking of this, her expression immediately became much gentler. Is there anything you need? You can take a look. I have quite a lot of things here. Meng Shun was a little embarrassed by Xiao Qing's gentle look. He flipped through the things in the stall, but his mind was thinking about how to strike up a conversation with Xiao Qing. If he suddenly said that he wanted to get to know her, would it make her think that he was a hooligan? What if Xiao Qing rejected him? What if Xiao Qing thought that he wasn't a good person and was wary of him? Meng Shun thought a lot. His hands unconsciously turned over, and then he felt that he had caught something. He looked down and found that he was holding Xiao Qing's foot. Meng Shun. Xiao Qing. Meng Shun quickly loosened his grip. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I was distracted. Xiao Qing silently withdrew her foot. Her face suddenly changed from gentle to expressionless. Is there anything you like? Meng Shun saw the look on her face that said, if you don't have it, hurry up and leave. He really wanted to apologize, but after thinking for a long time, he picked up something and said, yes. He didn't know why, but when he was in front of Xiao Qing, he was obviously sharp-tongued and knew how to talk, but when he was in front of Xiao Qing, he couldn't wait to spit out word by word. The moment he picked it up, Meng Shun regretted it because it was an unopened pack of sanitary pads. Xiao Qing's heart collapsed. She had met a pervert. Actually, Meng Shun was here to flirt with her, right? Meng Shun subconsciously loosened his grip, but in the next second, he took the thing back and said in a very sincere tone, I bought it for my friend. Xiao Qing silently stretched out a finger. Meng Shun took out a crystal and gave it to Xiao Qing. Sure enough, in his mind, crystals were like steel bulbs. They were priced at the same time. Xiao Qing, who originally wanted to chase him away, silently restrained herself. However, in her heart, she had already equated Meng Shun with a pervert. Meng Shun picked a few more things that he was really interested in. Then he tried to chat with Xiao Qing. Your name is Xiao Qing, right? It's a very nice name. Xiao Qing smiled slightly, but in her heart she thought, damn, he is really a pervert. He actually investigated my name. Meng Shun said again, my name is Meng Shun, not Meng Shun. Meng is Meng and Shun is Shun. Xiao Qing, who didn't want to know his name, smiled slightly. Meng Shun was a little dispirited. He had lived in the laboratory for a long time. Although his IQ was high, his EQ was extremely low. He was the worst at dealing with people. Seeing that Xiao Qing obviously didn't want to communicate with him, Meng Shun couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. Fortunately, he was a very tenacious person. Soon he cheered up. I saw your badge. Are you also a psychic? Xiao Qing nodded. I'm a wood psychic. Meng Shun dryly tried to find a topic. What a coincidence. I'm a spirit psychic. Xiao Qing couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. If it was another psychic, she might really not want to talk to Meng Shun. Unfortunately, Meng Shun was a spirit psychic. Xiao Tong was also a spiritual type metahuman, and spiritual type metahumans were as rare as lightning type metahumans. Xiao Qing didn't have anything to help Xiao Tong, but now she had met another spiritual type metahuman. Xiao Qing, who had been cold, immediately became interested. You're a spirit psychic? Yes. Meng Shun smiled slightly. He had relatively few expressions and smiles, but when he smiled, he was particularly good-looking. His whole face glowed with a very attractive brilliance, especially his slightly curved phoenix eyes. Even Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment. But soon Meng Shan's smile disappeared, and he returned to his serious and somewhat abstinent appearance. Xiaoqing couldn't help but say, "I have a companion who's also a spirit psychic. What a coincidence." Meng Shan was also interested. There are very few spirit psychics. It's fate to meet one. Spirit psychics aren't easy to grasp and control. It's one of the more difficult types of psychics. I seem to have said a lot of nonsense. No, I like to hear it. Do you have any tricks? Xiaoqing smiled gently. Meng Shan immediately felt that he seemed to have a chance to strike up a conversation with Xiaoqing. He hurriedly revealed the way he practiced his spirit power. I often use my spirit power to try to pick up some things. At first, I start with small things like bowls and chopsticks. Then I slowly try to pick up bigger things. It's very useful for the growth of spirit power. Thank you. Xiaoqing wrote it down and returned a smile. Then she got some information about spirit power from Meng Shan. For example, spirit power was very strong, but at the same time it was also very fragile. Once overdrawn or seriously injured, it was easy to become mentally retarded. Therefore, when spirit psychics were relatively weak, they had to be protected as much as possible. When they grew to a certain level, they would be somewhat safe. If spirit psychics grew up, they would be very scary. They could kill people and zombies without leaving a trace. When she was almost done, Xiaoqing's face changed. Do you have anything else to buy? Meng Shan looked at the pile of things in his hand and then looked at the things on the stall. He silently shook his head. Then he heard Xiaoqing say coldly, "Then why don't you leave?" Meng Shan's heart broke at that moment. No matter how much he said, it couldn't change his image in Xiaoqing's mind. A pervert. Chapter 74. Meng Shan went back gloomily. Yin Pingshan had been waiting for him for a long time. When he saw him, he hurriedly asked, "How was it? Did you get anything?" Meng Shan put a pile of things on the ground, then said with a serious face, "Her name is Xiaoqing." And then, Yin Pingshan waited for a long time, then saw that Meng Shan was still looking at him with a serious face, but didn't want to continue. Meng Shan pointed at the pile of things on the ground, then sat down to drink water. Yin Pingshan was speechless. "That is to say, you went out and found out her name and we knew it long ago. Why did you bring back a pile of junk? Tell me, how many crystal stones did you spend?" Yin Pingshan was prepared, but he was still surprised when Meng Shan pointed at him. "What? 5 crystal stones? You spent 5 crystal stones on this pile of junk?" Meng Shan said innocently, "No, I didn't spend 5. Then when Yin Pingshan let out a sigh of relief, he said calmly, "It's 50. Yin Pingshan sat down on the ground. At that moment he almost burst into tears. 50 crystal stones. He took the team of paranormals all the way from Zhongbei Survivor Base to S-City Survivor Base. How many crystal stones did he get? 50 crystal stones. What kind of wastrel was this? He couldn't take it out and beat him to death. Could he? You spent 50 crystal stones and found out her name? Yin Pingshan asked with a trembling voice. Meng Shan looked at Yin Pingshan sitting on the ground trembling. He couldn't bear it. He thought carefully, then said, "She has a companion who is a psychic paranormal." Yin Pingshan propped himself up from the chair and sat down dispiritedly. "Did you talk about anything else? Like being friends or something?" Meng Shan shook his head, then said with a slightly livelier tone, "I made an appointment with her tomorrow. She didn't refuse. No one would refuse a sucker who came to their door." Yin Pingshan trembled and covered his heart, then said to himself, "Last night how Yun treated me, why didn't I eat more? At least make up for the loss." Meng Shan didn't listen to Yin Pingshan's nagging. He was thinking about his own plan. "I think if I talk to her a few more times we should get familiar. I can feel that she is a very cautious girl, but she is a good person. She is a good girl. Why would she cheat you so many crystal stones if she is a good person? Wake up, young man. She just thinks that you're a fool with a lot of money and are easy to trick." However, Yin Pingshan didn't want to discourage Meng Shan. He organized his words then said, "In that case you can talk to her tomorrow, but don't bring too many crystal stones tomorrow. Promise me, okay?" Meng Shan nodded. then carried the pile of things into his room. He found a notebook and began to write down the tips of training psychic paranormal. His intuition told him that he could make her like him. Xiaoqing didn't manage to get more than a few high-grade zombie nuclei in one day. After all superpowered people needed to absorb zombie nuclei to evolve, and not many of them would be stupid enough to sell their nuclei. However, she sold a lot of things. Coupled with the income provided by Meng Shun, the spendthrift, today was not a bad day. In the afternoon, she packed up and went back early. She and her friends seemed to have formed a tacit understanding that although they lived separately, they would eat together. After all, Yan Hanqing and Xiaoqing's culinary skills weren't bad. Much better than Gu Panpan and her sister. Therefore, the two of them would always come over to freeload every meal. Moreover, every time they split the spoils, they would consciously leave behind a portion of the food as their rations and leave it with Xiaoqing. The reward for this mission was very rich. They didn't need to do any missions in a short time. They only needed to rest and cultivate. The more their abilities improved, the safer their next mission would be. Before most of her friends broke through to level 3, Xiaoqing didn't want to go on any big missions. At most, they would take on some simple missions. A moderate amount of fighting was also good for them. However, after the last mission, the higher-ups seemed to value Xiaoqing and the rest more. There was also a level 3 paranormals team called Qi Yan. They found Xiaoqing and wanted to talk to Xiaoqing about merging baby Meng into Qi Yan. They were directly rejected by Xiaoqing. After dinner, Xiaoqing called Xiaotong over and taught Xiaotong all the knowledge she learned from Meng Shun in the day. Xiaotong was mute, but she wasn't stupid. On the contrary, she was actually very smart. It was just that she was injured too much previously, which caused her to be a little slow. After her ability evolved, she was also slowly recovering. After Xiaoqing explained those things to her, she quickly understood and deduced many things from one example. After Xiaotong obtained a new method to train her mental strength, she didn't stop. She kept using her mental strength to lift this and that. Xiaotong actually yearned to become stronger. She didn't want to be protected under Xiaoqing's wings. She hoped that she could help Xiaoqing, even if it was just a little. However, Xiaotong was still relatively weak after all. Soon, her spiritual power was almost exhausted. At this time, she could feel that from the strange crystal hanging around her neck, there was a cool aura slowly entering her body, restoring her spiritual power. On the other side, Xiaoqing also returned to her room. After absorbing the crystal for a while, she suddenly had an idea. Xiaotong and Meng Shun were both psychic paranormals, so they could lift something with their mental strength. But she also had spiritual power. Didn't this mean that in fact, everyone had the potential to become a psychic? It was just that some people had more spiritual power while others had less. Those who had more spiritual power had a higher chance of becoming a psychic when they awakened their psychic abilities. If she also trained her mental strength, would she develop a second ability in the future? Xiaoqing was a person who liked to do things immediately. She closed her eyes and meditated for a long time, slowly mobilizing the mental strength that she had spent a long time to feel. Then, she slowly tried to mobilize this mental strength. If Xiaotong's mental strength was a lake, then hers was only a basin of water. Needless to say, the gap between them was naturally obvious. However, under Xiaoqing's control, the crystal in her hand really slowly floated up. However, it only lasted for a few seconds, and then the crystal fell back into Xiaoqing's palm. Even with Xiaoqing's physique, she felt as if she was covered in cold sweat, and her head was faintly aching like being pricked by needles. This was the feeling of overdrawing one's mental strength. She suddenly felt very sorry for Xiaotong. Just overdrawing one's mental strength was already so uncomfortable. How painful would it be for Xiaotong to be injured many times? However, Xiaoqing didn't think too much about it. Because of the overdraft of her mental strength, she lay on the bed and soon fell asleep. Chapter 75. The next day when Xiaoqing went out to set up her stall, she saw Meng Shun again. He gave Xiaoqing a booklet. Xiaoqing flipped through it and asked, "What's this?" "My experience on spiritual power cultivation." Meng Shun smiled and said, "I organized it into a booklet last night. You can take it back and show it to your companions." "Thank you." Xiaoqing paused for a moment. She didn't know how to react. She originally thought that Mengshen was a stupid, rich, and strange pervert. However, Mengshen's behavior made her feel a little embarrassed. I like your character very much. I want to be friends with you. You don't have to thank your friends. Mengshen quickly recalled the booklet Yan Pingshan gave him before he came here. His memory was very good. He memorized that long booklet in a short while. What a strange person. Xiaoqing silently changed the label of Mengshen from a stupid, rich pervert to a strange pervert. Then, from a strange pervert to a pervert that she could probably get in touch with. Mengshen said dryly, "There's one more thing. I came from Jiangbei Survivor Base. We're about to return to Jiangbei Survivor Base. I want to invite you. Do you have a team of ability users?" Xiaoqing nodded and said, "My team is just a level 2 ability user team. Moreover, it's just formed not long ago. You'd better think about what you want to invite us to do first." It's like this. Many of the guards who escorted us here were injured along the way. It might be a little difficult for them to escort us back. Therefore, I want to invite your team to escort us back. You can treat it as a mission. I'll pay you according to the usual mission of the same level. Mengshen said carefully, "I can also pay you half of the reward before the mission. The other half will be paid when we arrive at the destination. How about it?" Xiaoqing didn't agree rashly. Instead, she asked, "Why did you choose our team? I believe that you should have investigated in advance. In S-City's Survivor Base, there are many powerful ability user teams. There are even 3 level 3 ability user teams. We're just a newly formed level 2 ability user team. If a normal person were to make a choice, they would choose from the 3 level 3 ability user teams, right? You're very cautious." He was wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, which covered the sharpness of his eyes and softened his aura. "That's right. I did my research beforehand. My initial choice was one of the 3 level 3 ability user teams. Later, you brought your team and the Storm team back. The Storm team was considered one of the more experienced and powerful ability user teams in your base. However, they were almost completely annihilated and none of you were missing. Don't talk to me about luck. I don't believe in that. In my opinion, even luck is a part of strength. There's more." Xiaoqing looked at Mengshen calmly. Perhaps it was because Mengshen had been trying to wash away his bad image in Xiaoqing's mind, but he had failed. What he said just now changed Xiaoqing's impression of him. He was insightful, attentive, observant, and analytical. If he was strong, he would be rational when he needed to be. He would be a good friend. Mengshen continued, "I have analyzed your operation in detail. It is very difficult to not lose a single person. The requirements for a team leader are also very high. You need to have enough foresight, rationality, decisiveness, and a certain amount of luck. Of course, you must have enough strength and teamwork. I have tried to bring in several top Esper teams from our base, but I found that none of them could guarantee that they could complete the mission without losing a single person. So I chose you. Is this reason enough?" Mengshen was very smart. He chose to say 80% of the truth and 20% of the lies. This way it was much harder to expose than a pure lie. Xiaoqing shook her head. "Even if I believe that you are sincerely inviting our team, I can't agree." "Why?" Mengshen frowned. "We can discuss the reward. As you said before, I have enough foresight, rationality, and decisiveness. It is because of this that I choose to refuse. A wise person should learn to give up appropriately. This mission is very difficult. I can't guarantee that I won't lose any of my teammates because of this mission. This is the main reason why I refuse." Xiaoqing was very calm. "My team is different from others. All my teammates are my family and the closest people to me. I can't accept losing even one of them." Mengshen was anxious. "Your thinking is very wrong. Do you want to choose a mission that is not dangerous at all in the future? All the paranormals break through their limits in danger, and then progress little by little. You are protecting them like this and also preventing them from becoming strong." Xiaoqing didn't explain anything. She just said lightly, "I am a very strong person, so I must protect everyone under my wings. You may think that my decision is not good for their future, but I think that I don't need them to be strong and unstoppable. I just want them to live safely and healthily until the end of the world, or until the end of the world." Mengshen took a deep breath and couldn't help but say, "What if one day, even you can't protect them? If there comes a day when I am unable to protect them, it will definitely be because of my death. Before I die, I will make proper arrangements for everyone. If they are about to be humiliated, I will take the first step and kill them. We will die together." Xiaoqing curled her lips and said with a smile that was not a smile. Mengshen opened his eyes wide. He had never seen someone like Xiaoqing. "You are simply unreasonable." Xiaoqing smiled. "Thank you for the compliment." Chapter 76. Yin Hanqing walked out of the kitchen with a big pot of chicken soup. He had a complicated look in his eyes. "I stewed chicken for Xiao Tong and the others. Do you want to drink some? The chicken soup should be able to absorb the energy." Xiaoqing shook her head. "All the food is useless to me. I have to spit it out after drinking it. It's too troublesome. You guys eat. I'll absorb the crystal stone for a while." When Xiaoqing was about to go in to absorb the crystal stone, Air Dai wanted to follow her. Then Little Bun grabbed the corner of her clothes. When Xiaoqing closed the door, she saw Little Bun was still scratching Air Dai. Xiaoqing sighed again. She felt that she had sighed away all the anger in her life in the past 2 days. When she sat down to absorb the crystal stone, Xiaoqing was shocked. She was embarrassed and focused all her attention on the outside world. She didn't realize that she was only 1 step away from level 4. What did she do? How did it rise to almost level 4 in just 1 night? It was as if she had eaten a miracle pill. She inevitably thought of the discordant things last night. After calming down, Xiaoqing put aside those shameful things and began to think about it. To study this, she had to start from the source. First of all, why did Erdai suddenly become like that? Although Erdai was different from ordinary zombies, they had their own consciousness and intelligence. However, their bodies were similar to ordinary zombies. At least in that aspect they were similar. If there wasn't any special reason, why did he suddenly become like that? This wasn't scientific. Xiaoqing thought carefully. She realized that she had only seen one zombie that was different in this aspect. It was the one that humiliated Chang Jiao and was later cut into cucumber sauce. Thinking of this, Xiaoqing was suddenly enlightened. Because yesterday she was still puzzled. She clearly remembered that she had an advanced zombie crystal stone, but she couldn't find it. It was very likely that she had given it to Air Dai by accident. Air Dai absorbed it without knowing, and that was why last night's incident happened. That was the only possibility. Otherwise, how could Air Dai suddenly become like that? Then what happened next was easy to deduce. It was very likely that this crystal caused some kind of mutation in Air Dai, and then he became like that. After she and Air Dai did that kind of thing, the energy of the crystal went through some kind of transformation, and a part of it entered her body. That zombie should be level 4. Which meant that she and Air Dai shared a level 4 zombie crystal and some unspeakable energy, which led her to almost reach level 4. This was the most likely possibility. No matter what had happened was in the past. People had to look forward. At least the increase in strength now was a consolation. Xiaoqing used up a lot of energy last night, and it was time for her to replenish her energy. She took out the remaining level 4 zombie crystal stone, and then began to absorb it. Probably because she used up too much energy last night. When Xiaoqing woke up, the level 4 zombie crystal was almost completely absorbed by her. Xiaoqing could also clearly feel that she was just a little bit away from breaking through. She decided to break through in one go. Soon the level 4 zombie crystal was completely absorbed by her. Then Xiaoqing took out a few level 3 zombie crystals, and absorbed them all in one go. The energy converged into a flood in her body. Xiaoqing tried to use the method that Mengshen taught her. She used her spiritual power to guide the energy into the nucleus in her brain. Boom! At that moment, Xiaoqing felt that her mind was like an explosion of fireworks, and then it went blank. After a long time of calmness, Xiaoqing woke up. Chapter 77. Xiaoqing could clearly feel the energy full of vitality flowing out of her crystal nucleus, rushing to her limbs and bones. Wherever the energy passed, her meridians, blood vessels, and muscles seemed to be recovering. At that moment, Xiaoqing firmly believed that as long as she kept leveling up, her body would become like a normal human one day. This was not the thing that made her happiest. What made her happiest was that little Bun would have a chance to become a normal person in the future. Wasn't this what she had been pursuing? After calming down, Xiaoqing went out. It was almost afternoon, but Gu Panpan and the others were sitting on the sofa. As soon as they saw Xiaoqing come out, Air Dai came over, followed by Gu Panpan. Sister, you finally came out. What's wrong? Xiaoqing tore Air Dai off her body. Although Air Dai used to like to stick to her, Xiaoqing didn't feel guilty at that time. Now that something really happened, Xiaoqing felt guilty. As soon as Air Dai stuck to her, she tore it off. Air Dai felt very wronged, but she didn't dare to say anything. Gu Panpan didn't care about this little detail. She just said, it's like this. Just now, the base sent someone over, saying that they want our team to represent the S-City Survivor Base and escort those people from Zhongbei Survivor Base back. Xiaoqing couldn't help but frown. First it was Meng Shun and now it was Yan Pingshan. They couldn't persuade her, but now they wanted to use force? Did you tell the base that we don't intend to do any missions recently? Gu Panpan said, I told you. When we thought about it, we felt that something wasn't right. There are so many teams of ability users in the base, so why did they pick us? I politely refused. Then that person said that this mission was mandatory and that we had to complete it. However, the reward for the mission was also very generous. Xiaoqing was a little angry. She didn't know what kind of conspiracy Meng Shen and the others had in mind when they tried to force them to take this mission, but it was definitely not a good thing. She wouldn't have stepped into this kind of trap, but someone forced her to step into it. Who would be happy? Did they say anything else? Xiaoqing asked coldly. They did. They said that we're representing the base and that we should be friendly to them along the way, and show them the strength of our base appropriately. They said that they'll pay us half of the reward first, and then give us the other half after we send them over. Gu Panpan huffed. Who cares about their reward? Xiaoqing also had a headache. She sat down and told Gu Panpan and the others what had happened before. Finally, she concluded, we still want to live in this base, so we can't offend the base. So we have to take this mission. But there is definitely a conspiracy behind it. Everyone should be careful when the time comes. I hope nothing bad will happen. While the entire team of mutants was on high alert, Yin Pingsheng was a little drunk. He reclined on the chair and grumbled to Meng Shun. That Hao Yun is so greedy. He might have already noticed that we've designated Baby Meng as the mutant team. He'll definitely send a second team to keep an eye on us. We'll have to depend on you then. Meng Shun was expressionless. Why rely on me? Aren't you close to that? Xiaoqing? I saw you lying there in the middle of the night writing love letters to her. You didn't want to do it when I asked you to. Yin Pingsheng rolled his eyes and didn't care about his image at all. Actually, you must be very happy deep down. Widows and whatnot are the most interesting things. I always thought that you were frigid, but now I know that you're actually horny on the inside. Chapter 78. Get lost. Meng Shen glared at Yan Pingshan coldly. He didn't explain what he had stayed up all night to write. When he thought of this, he felt a little sad. He had written until midnight before his expression looked slightly better. Yan Pingshan muttered a few more words before saying, You're lying. I'm going to sleep first. Meng Shen tugged at his collar. He couldn't help but think of Xiaoqing. She was the most unique woman he had ever seen. The next day, Yin Pingshan went directly to Xiaoqing's place to discuss the upcoming mission. When he arrived, it happened to be dinner time at Xiaoqing's place. Yin Hanqing had just finished cooking, and Gu Panpan and the others were walking out of the kitchen, each carrying a plate. A rich aroma wafted through the air. Yin Pingsheng's nose twitched, and his eyes were glued to the dishes on the table. They seemed delicious. I just finished cooking. Do you want to eat together? Xiaoqing smiled slightly and said politely. Yin Pingshan felt that he should decline first to show that he was reserved. Then, when Xiaoqing invited him again, he could pretend that he reluctantly agreed because of Xiaoqing's hospitality. That would make him look more dignified. Thus, Yin Pingshan waved his hand and said, How can I accept that? I've already eaten. You guys can eat. Xiaoqing nodded and said, "Then we'll eat first. I'll go get you a glass of water." Yan Pingshan was speechless. This wasn't the script. He looked at the plain water in front of him and then at the family eating happily. If he could turn back time, Yan Pingshan would definitely go back to just a moment ago and then shamelessly say, "That's great. It just so happens that I haven't eaten either." This was probably what it meant to be unsuccessfully pretentious. While Yan Hanqing and the others were eating, Xiaoqing walked over to Yan Pingshan with a glass of water. "May I know what brings you here?" Yan Pingshan collected his thoughts and said seriously, "Of course, I want to talk to you about the next escort mission. I have to apologize to you first. I mentioned to S-City Base that we were short of manpower and wanted to borrow some people from S-City Survivor Base. Then I mentioned you guys, by the way. I didn't talk to you in advance and rashly proposed to choose you guys. It's my fault, please forgive me." Xiaoqing's heart was naturally full of anger, but she couldn't show it on the surface. That was why she deliberately made Yan Pingshan suffer in these small matters. She said lightly, "It's our honor to have you take a fancy to our team. I don't know when we will set off and what kind of mission will we have. We will start the return journey tomorrow afternoon. You don't need to do too much. Just protect us along the way." Yan Pingshan quickly took out a small bag and poured the things inside on the table. "This is the promised reward. I will send the other part in the afternoon." On the table were the 10 level 3 zombie nuclei that Yan Pingshan had promised before. These nuclei were placed on the table, which slightly reduced Xiaoqing's anger. She glanced at them and nodded. "Will we meet at the square tomorrow afternoon? We will be there on time." "Yes, 1 o'clock. Yan Pingshan forced himself not to look at the table, but the smell of the food seemed to be against him, constantly drilling into his nose. Yan Hanqing's cooking was not for show. The smell made Yan Pingshan's mouth almost drool, but he had to pretend to be calm. "Is there anything else?" Xiaoqing's meaning was very clear. If there was nothing else, he should leave. Don't delay their meal. Chapter 79. Hearing that, Yan Pingshan didn't want to stay any longer, so he got up and said, "I don't have anything else to say. I'll go back now. I won't disturb you guys from eating." Xiaoqing didn't even want to see him off. She just watched him leave alone. After Yan Pingshan left, Xiaoqing picked up the zombie nuclei one by one and checked them with her weak spirit power. Every zombie nucleus was full of energy, so it wasn't fake. "Everyone, hurry up and eat. Once we're done, I'll divide these zombie crystal nuclei. Let's work hard tonight and try to have a few level 3 superpowered people by tomorrow's mission," Xiaoqing said while checking if there were any zombie crystal nuclei that had undergone special evolution. The few people over there finished their meal in silence. Then Yan Hanqing was responsible for cleaning up the dishes and the others sat over. Now Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan were both at the peak of level 2. They were only one step away from level 3. After absorbing level 3 zombie nuclei, the possibility of them breaking through was very high. Although Yan Hanqing got his superpower late, he had also reached level 2. He was only a little bit weaker than Gu Chuan and his sister, so the possibility of him breaking through was also very high. After experiencing the relatively peaceful thing last night, he was now at level 3. Xiao Tong's superpower was the rarest. She was also the weakest one among them. In addition, spirit power didn't evolve purely by absorbing energy, so the possibility of her breaking through was slightly smaller. Even Little Bun had reached level 2 with the support of snacks every day and night. However, Little Bun didn't have any attack power, so his fighting power was almost negligible. After thinking about it, Xiaoqing gave Air Dai a level 3 zombie nucleus to consolidate his realm after absorbing it. Then she gave Gu Panpan too. Gu Panpan was a superpowered person with strength and body, so it was easy for her to evolve. 2 nuclei should be enough for her to reach level 3. He then gave Xiao Tong another piece and told her to absorb it and accumulate energy. If Xiao Tong wanted to break through, the key was still the strange crystal core hanging around her neck. Gu Chuan and Yan Hanqing each got 3 nuclei. Xiaoqing told them not to save any crystals. Zombie nuclei were meant to be absorbed. She told them to be sure to reach level 3 before tomorrow. This way, when everyone went out on a mission together, they would be more secure. 10 crystals were distributed like this. Then the group was driven away by Xiaoqing for closed-door training. After they all left, Little Bun crawled up to Xiaoqing's lap. He stared at Xiaoqing with his big round eyes and asked, "Is Dai Dai my new daddy?" Xiaoqing almost couldn't hold it in and stood up from the sofa. She choked and stared with her eyes wide open. "Baby, what did you say?" Little Bun hugged Xiaoqing's waist with grievance and whispered, "Mama's whole body is full of Dai Dai's smell. Mama also sleeps with Dai Dai." Xiaoqing's face was as red as a monkey's butt. Being told by her own son like this was simply shameful play. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. Little Bun lay in Xiaoqing's arms and stuck out his little butt. He said with a sobbing voice, "The book said that if there is a stepfather, there will be a stepmother. Then Mama will give birth to a baby and don't want me anymore. Is it true?" Xiaoqing immediately felt distressed. She picked up Little Bun and kissed his face. "Baby, I won't have a second baby in my life. You are my one and only. I don't want anyone but you." The Little Bun pouted and reached out to wrap his arms around Xiaoqing's neck, whispering, "But Mama doesn't like Bao Bao anymore. Mama is so busy and doesn't sleep with Bao Bao anymore. I sleep with Tong Tong and play with Tong Tong. Mama doesn't talk to me much either." Chapter 80. From afar she saw some familiar faces there. These familiar faces were none other than the Blazing Flame ability user team that wanted to merge Baby Meng into their ability user team back then. In the base, Jian ranked slightly higher than Fierce Wind, especially after Fierce Wind lost 6 or 7 members. Jian's captain was a fire paranormal, so the name of the paranormal team was based on the captain's special ability. Qi Yan was also the only third-level ability user team with a female captain. Qi Yan's captain was called Yan Ru. Back then, she had taken a fancy to Xiaoqing's ability and wanted to merge Baby Meng into their team. When the two teams stood together, the style was especially different. Everyone on Yan Ruru's team was fully equipped with weapons, looking especially stylish. On Xiaoqing's side, the captain was carrying the child, and there were 2 others who looked underage. Yan Hanqing was also carrying a bottle of soy sauce that he bought when he passed by the market. At first glance, it exuded a strong rustic aura. It was very down-to-earth. Anyway, the style of the 2 teams was completely different. Yan Ruru and Chang Jiao were somewhat similar. The difference was that Yan Ruru was more imposing, and it was obvious that she had a fiery temper. Yan Ruru couldn't help but twitch her mouth. "Why did you bring the child out?" Xiaoqing scratched Little Bun's chin. "Call me Auntie." Little Bun blinked his big eyes and gave a cute smile to Yan Ruru. "Hello, Auntie." Yan Ruru's handsome face softened. "So obedient," Xiaoqing said very seriously. "I don't feel at ease leaving my son anywhere, so it's better to bring him along." Yan Ruru lowered her voice and said, "But it's so dangerous outside. Why don't you hire someone to take care of him? There are many missions for ordinary people in the mission hall. If you're worried, I can introduce you to 2 more reliable ones." Xiaoqing shook her head. "It's a little dangerous, but I'm not worried. If he's not in front of me, I won't feel at ease doing missions outside. More importantly, if I die, there will be no one to take care of him in the future. It's better for him to stay by my side and live and die together." Yan Ruru patted Xiaoqing's shoulder and didn't say anything else. She just said, "Don't affect the team." Xiaoqing nodded. At this time, Yan Pingshan's people came over. Yan Pingshan had mutants too, but some of them were injured on the way here and hadn't recovered yet. This was one of the reasons why they needed a team of mutants. "2 captains, nice to meet you." Yan Pingshan smiled and reached out his hand to shake hands with Xiaoqing and Yan Ruru. He was very gentlemanly when he was serious. Mengshan also came over and shook hands with Xiaoqing. He slightly raised the corner of his mouth, and the curve of his smile was almost non-existent. "I'm very happy that you agreed." Xiaoqing wanted to complain. If it weren't for the mandatory mission of the base, she would never have agreed to this mission. It was such a long road from S-City to Zhongbei Survivor Base. No one knew what would happen along the way. The danger and unpredictability were too high. Although she was disgusted, Xiao Qing's expression didn't change. She shook hands with Meng Shun. Then the captain of the mutant team in Jiangbei Survivor Base came over and asked, "When are we leaving?" The captain of the mutant team in Jiangbei was the only male captain of the 3 mutant teams. He looked very steady, so he should be a reliable person. "We're leaving right away." Yin Pingshan waved his hand and then asked Xiao Qing with a smile, "Captain Xiao, do you want to take our car? We can also catch up." Chapter 81. The corner of Xiao Qing's mouth twitched, and she decisively refused. "Who wants to talk about old times with you?" Yin Pingshan expressed his regret, but he didn't stop her. He knew that forcing Xiao Qing's team to carry out this mission had already made Xiao Qing very unhappy. Now was the time to increase her favorability. If he continued to pester her, her favorability would probably be infinitely negative. The first to leave the base was the Blaze Paranormal Team's vehicle, followed by the people from Jiangbei Survivor Base, and finally Xiao Qing's team. There were many vehicles transporting supplies in the Jiangbei Survivor Base. They were all covered with large tarpaulins so they couldn't see what was inside. However, it was easy to understand that they must be trading goods with S-City's Survivor Base. Jiangbei Survivor Base was a little bigger than S-City's Survivor Base in terms of size, and the number of people inside was also a little more. Moreover, Jiangbei Survivor Base was backed by a very long and wide river. The zombies on the other side of the river couldn't cross over, so it was a little safer than S-City's Survivor Base in terms of safety. However, after the apocalypse, the climate there was worse than here, so it was very difficult to grow vegetables in season. In this area, Jiangbei Survivor Base was inferior to S-City's Survivor Base. When it was time for lunch, although they gathered together, they ate separately. Everyone started to cook. They simply cooked a pot of dry food, while Xiao Qing's team had already divided the work of cooking and cooking. In fact, they didn't cook any complicated dishes. They just brought some cold rice, fried it with eggs and vegetables, and then steamed it. However, nothing was afraid of comparison. The moment Yin Pingshan smelled the aroma, he raised his head and looked at Xiao Qing's side. Golden eggs wrapped in rice, green vegetables, and thin slices of bacon. Then he looked at his own side. A pot of dry food was cooked like dog food, and there were small salted vegetables on the side. This was today's lunch. The gap between them shouldn't be too big. While Yin Pingshan was hesitating, Yen Ruru had already moved quickly to sit beside Xiao Qing and began to curry favor with her. "Do you always bring such rich ingredients when you go out? Children can't lack nutrition." Xiao Qing smiled and filled a bowl for Yen Ruru. She had a good impression of Yen Ruru. Yen Ruru was not pretentious. She took it and thanked her. Yen Pingshan immediately bit his chopsticks and fell into a cycle of sobbing. He also wanted to eat. Sob sob sob. Why was the difference in treatment so big? Sob sob sob. If he went over now, would he be able to get a bowl? Sob sob sob. If Xiao Qing didn't give it to him, would it be embarrassing? Sob sob sob. When he finished crying, he found that Meng Shun had already sat down. Meng Shun was very direct. "Can you give me a bowl? A small bowl is fine." Since Meng Shun had spoken, and he had helped Xiao Qing would naturally give him face, so she also filled a bowl for him. Fortunately, she made a little more, or it would not be enough. Yin Pingshan did not cry. He ran over with the bowl and looked at Xiao Qing with shining eyes. "I also want to eat." Xiao Qing was particularly rude to Yin Pingshan. Yin Pingshan did not help her, and he was the culprit who caused her to have to go on a mission. Why should she be nice to him? Xiao Qing calmly distributed all the rice in the pot to Meng Shun and the others evenly. Everyone's bowl was piled up with a tip. After doing all this, Xiao Qing showed the empty pot to Yin Pingshan. "Look, there's no more." Yin Pingshan held an empty bowl and felt particularly miserable, especially when he saw Yen Ruru and Meng Shun holding the bowls and looking at him with mocking eyes while eating. Yin Pingshan was particularly sad. Putting aside Yen Ruru, he and Meng Shun were in the same group. Why was the treatment different? Chapter 82. Was it because Meng Shun had spent the entire night writing love letters? Was it too late for him to write them now? Xiaoqing couldn't bear to see Yin Pingshen's miserable state. She said softly, "Do you want my bowl?" Yin Pingshen couldn't take away a girl's lunch. He swallowed a mouthful of blood and said softly, "No, I'm already full. No, I want to eat, I don't want to eat that pot of dog food." Xiaoqing gave him a knowing look. Then she passed the bowl to Meng Shun. "If he doesn't want to eat it, you can eat it. I'm full anyway." Meng Shun quickly put the rice in the bowl into his own bowl. Then he smiled at Xiaoqing. "Thank you." Yin Pingshen immediately knelt down. Xiaoqing was definitely targeting him. Definitely. Yin Pingshen felt very wronged, especially when he was compared to Meng Shun. He sat back in his seat and looked at the dog food in the pot. Then he looked at Meng Shun, who was so happy that he almost buried his face in the bowl. He felt even more unbalanced. Brother Yen, Fatty, who was cooking, scooped a bowl of rice for Yin Pingshen and paired it with a small green pickled cucumber. He looked at him with pity and said, "Eat first. If there was no comparison, it wouldn't hurt." After all, they usually ate this kind of dry food when they went out. However, the comparison was right in front of him. Yin Pingshen really couldn't eat. Every time he took a bite, he felt a little more tears in his heart. Compared to Meng Shun, who liked to speak ill of him, Xiaoqing was really more ruthless. While eating, he thought fiercely, Meng Shun and Xiaoqing are really a match made in heaven. After eating, they took a short rest and continued to move forward. Before nightfall, they had to pass through the empty town in front of them. There were no people in these towns. They were all zombies. If they were still in the town before nightfall, it was very likely that they would be attacked at night. It was very troublesome. After passing the town, there were no zombies in the short distance, so it was relatively safe. These experiences were slowly accumulated after the apocalypse. People had sacrificed a lot of blood and lives. Every experience could save a life. The road ahead is blocked. While walking, the leader of the blazing team sent a message. The team could only stop where they were. Xiaoqing asked her friends to look after the car, and then walked over with the clingy air Dai and Xiaobao. Yin Pingshen and the others were already waiting there. They didn't know why, but there were big cracks in the ground. It was probably because of the earthquake. Each crack was 5 or 6 meters wide, and the narrower ones were more than a meter. The vehicles certainly couldn't pass through. Yin Pingshen and the others' faces couldn't help but become ugly. When they came here, the road was pretty good. They didn't expect that it would become like this when they went back. More importantly, this was the safest road. No matter which way they went, it was inevitable that they would pass through a lot of zombies. The loss of people was certain. What should we do? Yin Ruru also frowned. Should we take a detour? She looked at the length of the cracks. It was impossible to go through from the edge. We can't take a detour. Yin Pingshen clenched his teeth. If we take a detour from the left, we will be on the highway. There are a lot of abandoned vehicles on the highway. Even if we ignore the zombies, it will be very troublesome to go forward. If we take a detour from the highway, we will be in the city. It is too dangerous to go through the city. If we take a detour from the right, it will be a wetland. It is very likely that there will be swamps and a lot of mutant plants. There will be no way to get through it. Yin Ruru couldn't help but say, but we can't go through it. If we don't take a detour, how can the vehicles pass through this huge crack? Not to mention the vehicles, even if we abandon the vehicles, it will be difficult to go through. Meng Shun squatted on the ground to check. The crack was very deep, so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. He took a stone and threw it down. There was the sound of the stone hitting the ground, but there was no sound of the stone falling. It was impossible to fill the crack, so they had to think of another way. Maybe we can let the Earth ability users create a road. Meng Shun thought for a long time and then said, how do we create it? Yin Pingshen's eyes lit up, and then he said. Meng Shun said seriously, this section is at most 100 meters wide, and there is solid ground in the middle. We only need to build a road above the crack like a bridge to support the vehicles. Yin Pingshen and Yin Ruru also thought that this method was feasible, so they each called 2 Earth ability users. They called the Earth ability users with the highest level in their respective teams, one at the peak of level 3, and one at the peak of level 2. Yin Pingshen told them about Meng Shun's idea, and then said, can you build a bridge? It is about 2 meters wide, and it doesn't need to be very thick, as long as our vehicles can pass through it. We can try. One of the Earth ability users squatted down, put his palms on the ground, and urged his ability. Soon the rolling soil seemed to be controlled by an invisible hand, and a 2-meter-wide bridge was formed crossing the crack. Yan Pingshan was very surprised and hurriedly said, "Call a car to try first. Wind ability users, get ready. If the bridge collapses, please hold the car with all your strength, and then the strength ability users will be responsible for dragging the car up." As soon as Yan Pingshan gave the order, people on both sides immediately got busy. When everyone was ready, the off-road vehicle with high hopes slowly drove onto the bridge. Under everyone's nervous gaze, the car crossed the bridge and then reversed back, and the earthen bridge did not collapse. Everyone couldn't help cheering, but Yan Pingshan saw Xiaoqing, who hadn't said a word from beginning to end. She frowned and looked dignified. Yan Pingshan couldn't help but stimulate her. "Captain Xiao, do you think there is any problem?" Xiaoqing pointed at the cracks in front of them and asked the two Earth-attributed superpowered men, "Build a bridge all the way across and maintain it until all the off-road vehicles have passed through. Can you two do it?" The scene suddenly became cold, including Yan Pingshan's heart. They seemed to have forgotten that the abilities of the ability users were limited, and when they ran out they would run out. Chapter 83. The two paranormals looked at each other in silence. They couldn't do it. Let alone the two of them, even if all the Earth paranormals on the scene were pulled out, they still wouldn't be able to do it. "Do you want us to go through one by one? After sending one car with all our strength, you guys can rest for a day and a half before sending the second car?" Xiaoqing said lightly. Yan Pingshan was silent for a long time. Then he asked Xiaoqing, "Do you have any other ideas?" Xiaoqing shook her head. "Apart from taking a detour, building a bridge is the only way." "Isn't that still nonsense? Building a bridge is the only way. They can't support all the cars. It's still a dead end," Yan Pingshan said with some annoyance. Xiaoqing didn't say anything. She looked at the long crack and suddenly asked, "How much loss will there be if we take a detour?" Mengshan said sincerely, "About 1/3 of the people will be left behind. They won't be able to reach the Zhongbei survivor base. This is just a rough estimate. It doesn't count as an accident." Xiaoqing hesitated for a short time. Then she called Guchuan over, "Build an ice bridge. Doesn't need to be too thick. It's enough to cross the crack. It's about 2 meters wide. It's thick enough to support a fully loaded car." Guchuan silently stretched out his hand. The moisture in the air was quickly extracted, and an ice bridge appeared above the crack. Xiaoqing tested the thickness, then said, "Let's try again." Yan Pingshan called the car and tried again. The car went on the bridge, and there was no sign of the ice bridge below cracking. Yan Pingshan's eyes immediately lit up. After the two Earth paranormals built the ice bridge, their faces became much paler. Guchuan, on the other hand, looked very calm. The difference between the two sides was obvious. "Can you hold on until all the cracks are covered?" Yan Pingshan couldn't help but ask. Guchuan shook his head. If he was a 4th-level ice paranormal, he could definitely do it, but he was only a 3rd-level paranormal. Yan Pingshan was a little disappointed, but Xiaoqing ignored him. She just asked Guchuan, "Can you reach 2/3 of the crack?" Guchuan nodded. He could reach that part of the crack, but he would be tired. "That's good." Xiaoqing nodded and said to Yan Pingshan, "Guchuan and me. You guys get ready to cross the bridge." But Yan Pingshan couldn't help but want to ask, wasn't Guchuan unable to hold on? Then he saw that Guchuan had already built the ice bridge. While Guchuan was building the ice bridge, the other two Earth paranormals didn't stay idle. Xiaoqing asked them to build a thin layer of ice bridge. Then Guchuan froze this layer of ice bridge, and then thickened it. This saved him a lot of energy. Seeing that Guchuan and the others had already started, Yan Pingshan also ordered everyone to get in the cars and drive them one by one in an orderly manner. Xiaoqing and Guchuan were in the front. Every time a layer of ice bridge was laid, Xiaoqing would press it to test it, and then continue to lay it down. After about 50 meters, Several Earth paranormals had already taken turns to lay down the ice bridge. Their energy had already been exhausted. Guchuan had to do it himself and completely built the ice bridge. At this time, the strength of a level 3 paranormals could be seen. His face was a little pale, but he didn't look like he had consumed a lot of energy. "Can you still hold on?" Xiaoqing tried, and now the ice bridge was obviously thinner than before. This wasn't because Guchuan was lazy, but because his energy was slowly being exhausted, and he didn't have the strength to continue. "It's barely the position you mentioned." Guchuan was very calm, but cold sweat was already seeping out of his forehead. Chapter 84. Just tell me when you're at your limit. Don't force yourself. Xiaoqing patted him on the shoulder and looked forward. There were only a few dozen meters left before they crossed the crevice. Guchuan nodded, but he still held on until his superpower was exhausted. Then he sat down on the ground. Yin Pingshan became anxious when he stopped. The whole team was still on the ice, but Guchuan could no longer hold on. By the time Guchuan recovered, the ice bridge had already melted, and the whole team had fallen into the crevice. Before Yin Pingshan could ask, he saw Xiaoqing help Guchuan up. Then she stretched out her right hand, and countless vines flew out. The vines were very flexible. They weaved themselves into the shape of a carpet in midair. Then everyone saw a scene that made their jaws drop. The carpet made of vines fell down. Many tentacle-like vines stretched out from both ends, and like chopsticks piercing into tofu, they easily pierced into the soil on both sides of the crevice. When they tightened, they turned into a green bridge. Everyone was shocked. Most of them couldn't believe it. How could vines support such heavy off-road vehicles? Especially the off-road vehicles in the middle. They were all full of things. Xiaoqing had already helped Guchuan move forward. Yin Pingshan gritted his teeth and ordered, "Go forward." They couldn't stop halfway. The driver drove forward with trepidation. To everyone's surprise, the vines were very tough. Walking on them was like walking on solid ground. Only a slight dent under the tires told them that the vines were soft. After Xiaoqing walked past all the cracks, she turned around and saw the sunlight refracted by the ice in patches of tender green. She heaved a sigh of relief and helped Guchuan sit down. If there was a second choice, Xiaoqing definitely wouldn't let Guchuan do it. First, it would be too tiring. Second, it would expose their strength. The taboo thing for people was to be completely seen through by others. Xiaoqing was worried about that. However, compared to the huge loss of manpower and uncertainties, exposing one's strength was nothing. When all the cars passed through the crevice, Xiaoqing waved her hand gently. The vines turned into wood energy and returned to her body. This was the difference between her and other superpowered people. Other people's superpowers were used, but she could take them back. Although it was inevitable that she would consume some of her power during the process, compared to other people she would consume less. This small difference might save her life in some life-or-death situations. Yin Pingshan had mixed feelings. When he and Mengshan went to persuade Xiaoqing, they mentioned many times that they were interested in the strength of Xiaoqing's team. However, in fact, Yin Pingshan didn't care much about that. After all, he had seen the top superpowered people in the base, so his vision was much higher. In his opinion, Xiaoqing's team was at most a little stronger than other teams. The fact was that Guchuan's strength was already around level 3. Then what about Xiaoqing, the team leader? What about the other members of her team? He seemed to have underestimated this superpowered team with a very strange name. Xiaoqing didn't say much. She helped Guchuan back to the car. After getting in, Xiaoqing asked Guchuan to go to the back seat to absorb the crystals. She sat in the front passenger seat with little Bun in her arms and continued to study the route. Yin Pingshan and the others had studied the route long ago. They knew which path to take was the least dangerous, which path to take was the shortest, and which path to take was the smoothest. However, Xiaoqing was a cautious person. She wasn't in the state where she could feed herself and her family. She had to keep a high level of vigilance. Chapter 85. Take this trip as an example. It was the safest route, but there was still an accident. Xiaoqing took the map and studied it carefully. If there was another accident, she could quickly find a second way out. She wouldn't be as helpless as she was this time. When they stopped for lunch in the afternoon, everyone's attitude towards Xiaoqing and the others was much better. After all, the strong always won more respect. After the meal, there was nothing much to do. It was not suitable to travel at night, but not many people could fall asleep so early in the morning. Therefore, at this time it was usually time to chat, play cards and communicate. Gu Chuan and the others were playing cards. Xiaoqing did not join them. She held Little Bun and chatted with Yen Ruru. As usual, there was an air dye by her side. Since that incident, air dye was particularly clingy. Even when it was free, it liked to sit beside her and look at her. Yen Ruru also had children at home. Unlike Xiaoqing, her husband loved her very much. Moreover, he was an ordinary person. It was not suitable for him to go out and do missions. Therefore, her family's model was that her husband took care of the children, and she went out to work. Naturally, the two mothers had a lot to talk about, especially about raising children. Although they were like chickens and ducks, they talked about different things. For example, Yen Ruru liked to talk about how much her baby ate for a meal, how he got fat again, and how he didn't like to sleep and was very noisy. Every time she came home, he would pester her to tell her stories. Xiaoqing liked to talk about how her Little Bun could eat a lot, but he didn't get fat or grow taller. He didn't like to sleep, but he didn't make trouble. Every night, he would pester her to sleep with him. Yen Ruru began to praise Little Bun, and Xiaoqing began to sigh. She was very annoyed that Little Bun didn't grow up. Gu Panpan, who was closer to them, had already made 3 mistakes. She wanted to laugh as she listened to their conversation. Even though the two of them were talking about similar things, they were still completely different from each other. If Yen Ruru understood Xiaoqing's meaning, she would probably be scared to death. How could a child from a normal family only eat crystals and not grow up? While Xiaoqing and Yen Ruru were chatting happily, Mengshen was pushed over by Yen Pingshen. Mengshen staggered and sat beside Xiaoqing, then asked, "What are you talking about? You look very happy." Xiaoqing said calmly, "We're talking about our son." Mengshen fell silent. He had prepared a lot of things to say and thought about what Xiaoqing might be talking about. He even thought about how to perfectly follow up with the conversation. In the end, he realized that Xiaoqing was talking about children. Firstly, he didn't have children. Secondly, he didn't have any experience in taking care of children. Thirdly, he didn't have much contact with children. He realized that he couldn't get a word in. More importantly, there was an air dye next to them. As soon as Mengshen got a little closer to Xiaoqing, the air dye would stare at Mengshen like a dog protecting its food. It would quietly push Mengshen when there was an opportunity. Mengshen felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He couldn't get a word in, so he sat in silence for a long time. In the end, he left pitifully. After he left, Yen Ruru laughed in a low voice. "He's interested in you. The way he looks at you is quite complicated." "And the one next to you?" Xiaoqing slapped the air dye and sighed. She rubbed the air dye's head and said, "He doesn't know anything. His feelings for me are probably just like how a baby bird feels for its mother." As for Mengshen, Xiaoqing smiled and didn't say anything. She had already determined that Mengshen wanted something from her. That was why he kept getting close to her. He didn't have any personal feelings for her. Xiaoqing had once thought about finding a father for Little Bun. At least Little Bun could have a complete family and a more complete childhood. Her first thought was Yan Hanqing. Chapter 86. First, they were both soldiers, so they were more harmonious in certain aspects. Second, Yan Hanqing's character was more or less understood after this period of time. He was a trustworthy person. Third, Yan Hanqing would not treat Little Bun badly, and would be absolutely loyal to her. In the end, something unspeakable happened between her and Air Dai. Air Dai was never a good match in her heart, not because he was a zombie, but because Air Dai really did not know anything. Now Air Dai's feelings for her might be dependence or affection, but it would not be love, because he did not even have his own consciousness, only the most basic instincts. Air Dai like this could be a friend or a partner, but he was not suitable to be a lover. But fate made fools of people, and in the end she and Air Dai did the most intimate thing. Not necessarily. Yin Ruru glanced at Air Dai. She had already classified Air Dai as someone who had a problem with his brain. To put it bluntly, he was an idiot. Yin Ruru said to Xiao Qing in an experienced tone, although he is stupid, his eyes are especially focused. Have you ever seen that, even if there are many people sitting next to him, there is no one else in his eyes except for you? Can be said that he only has you in his world. I think that the person who can be treated like this by him will be very happy. Xiao Qing was stunned, and then she heard Yin Ruru say, you should not deny his ability to be a lover because of some of his problems. Maybe you can try to understand and accept. At least in my opinion, he is sincere to you. In fact, it is good for you to be like this with him. At least he can't leave you, and he will not betray you. Xiao Qing forced a smile. You are very experienced. Let's not talk about this. It is quite late now, and it is time to sleep. Let's talk another day. Okay. Yin Ruru patted her butt and walked lazily to her tent. I'll talk to you another day. Xiao Qing carried Little Bun and turned around to see Air Dai sitting behind her, looking at her intently. She couldn't help but think about Yin Ruru's words. You're the only one in his eyes. You're his entire world. Wasn't this a kind of bone-deep romance? Xiao Qing couldn't accept Air Dai immediately, but Xiao Qing's attitude towards Air Dai had changed a lot. At least she didn't treat her like a spoiled child anymore. Xiao Qing felt that when Dummy's level slowly increased in the future and his IQ recovered, his memory of his life might slowly awaken. If Dummy could say that he loved her at that time, then she would consider being with him. Even if she accepted Air Dai into her and Little Bun's life, it would be an Air Dai with a healthy mind and intelligence, and not an Air Dai like he was now. Xiao Qing brought Little Bun into the tent, and Air Dai followed. Xiao Qing was about to take off her coat when she saw Air Dai crawl under the blanket. Air Dai noticed Xiao Qing looking at him, so he lifted the blanket and patted it, indicating that he would warm the blanket for Xiao Qing and let Xiao Qing sleep in his arms. Xiao Qing was speechless. Ever since that incident, Dummy's attitude towards Xiao Qing had changed a lot. He looked at Xiao Qing as if he was looking at his own wife. He was especially happy, and in his joy there was doting, and in his doting there was also shyness. Air Dai was then kicked out. He persistently tried to crawl into the tent, but was kicked out again and again. Air Dai shamelessly tried to crawl into Xiao Qing's bed no matter what. After failing multiple times, he pitifully changed his target to crawling into the tent. He even hid in a corner so Xiao Qing couldn't kick him. Chapter 87. Xiao Qing let him off the hook and let him curl up in the corner, hugging his knees and curling up into a ball. He looked particularly miserable and pitiful. Xiao Qing hugged Little Bun and slept for a while. Then she woke up and couldn't help but look at Air Dai in the corner. Air Dai had curled up his slender body into a very small ball, which didn't take up much space. It was as if he was afraid that Xiao Qing would kick him out again. Xiao Qing's heart softened and she wanted to call Air Dai to the bed. In the end, she steeled her heart and turned over to continue sleeping. However, she couldn't sleep well as she kept thinking about Air Dai's pitiful appearance. After a while, she woke up again. When she turned over, she realized that Air Dai didn't seem to be in his original position. He moved forward a little. Although he didn't move much forward, he definitely moved a little. Xiao Qing closed her eyes and pretended that she was asleep. After a while, she squinted her eyes and saw Air Dai moving forward sneakily. He moved and moved until he was very close to the bed. Although he moved closer, Air Dai didn't dare to get into the bed. He just wanted to get closer to Xiao Qing so that he could look at Xiao Qing up close. Looking at Air Dai's pitiful appearance and even more pitiful eyes, Xiao Qing sighed. As soon as she spoke, Air Dai was startled. He quickly returned to his original position and lowered his head, pretending to be asleep. Xiao Qing was amused by him. She moved inside and made room for him. Then she said to him, "Get into the bed and sleep, but don't move around. Don't disturb the baby. You have to sleep well." Air Dai was already hugging his head and prepared to be kicked out. When he heard Xiao Qing's words, he was so happy that he almost jumped up. Without another word, He took off his coat and crawled into the bed. Dai was worried that Xiaoqing would go back on her words, so he was very obedient once he got into the bed. He took up a small space and continued to curl up into a ball. When Xiaoqing and Dai slept in the same bed, if a normal person came in, they would probably rather sleep on the floor outside than sleep in the bed within 10 minutes. Because the bed was too cold, none of the three of them had a normal temperature. When she touched them, they were all cold as if they had just been taken out of the freezer. Even though there wasn't much warmth, Dai especially liked to lean on Xiaoqing when he fell asleep. Before he fell asleep, he remembered that he had to curl up into a ball and try not to take up any space. After he fell asleep, he began to unscrupulously stretch his body. The next morning, the three of them were like this. Xiaoqing was hugging Little Bun, Dai was hugging Xiaoqing's waist, and one of his legs was pressing down on Xiaoqing's leg. After Xiaoqing woke up, she mercilessly kicked Dai out of the bed. Dai didn't know what happened, but he was already outside the tent. His chin hit the ground first and his face was blank. Therefore, when people passed by Xiaoqing's tent, they all saw Dai lying on the ground like a poor boy who was chased out of the house by his wife. The poor boy didn't feel that he was pitiful, so he happily went back into the tent again. He helped Xiaoqing pass socks, Xiaoqing's shoes and Xiaoqing's coat. He was very attentive. Xiaoqing wasn't angry with him. She just found him interesting, so she kept a straight face. Dai didn't know. He thought that Xiaoqing was angry, so he kept looking at Xiaoqing pitifully, racking his brains to please his wife. He was afraid that Xiaoqing wouldn't let him into the bed at night. "Captain Xiao, you're up early." Yan Pingshan smiled and greeted him. "Have you eaten?" He deliberately emphasized the three words, Captain Xiao. When ordinary people heard this title, they would definitely be polite. For example, they would say, "Don't call me Captain X, just call me XX. Chapter 88. That way Yan Pingshan could logically address Xiaoqing as Xiaoqing, Qingqing, and so on. It was a more intimate form of address, and he would be able to close the distance between them. It was simply perfect. However, Xiaoqing had no intention of correcting him at all. She said lightly, "Team Leader Yan, you're early too. I just woke up. Is something the matter?" Yan Pingshan's heart was about to break down. He had just realized a very serious problem. Xiaoqing's brain was wired differently from a normal person's. Therefore, he had been using a normal way of thinking to communicate with Xiaoqing. As a result, their relationship was getting further and further apart. Just like this time, Xiaoqing had at least called him by his name previously. Now, she had directly addressed him as team leader. He had originally wanted to close the distance between them, but in the end, he had unknowingly pushed the distance away. "Nothing much. If there's nothing else, I'll go wash up first." Xiaoqing smiled slightly. Her entire face revealed the message, "Since there's nothing else, hurry up and leave. Don't stay here and get in my way, okay?" Yan Pingshan was especially aggrieved. He was so aggrieved that he wanted to cry. In the end, he decided to go back and organize his thoughts before fighting again. After Yan Pingshan left, Xiaoqing yawned, brushed her teeth and washed her face. Dai and Little Bun had also been trained by Xiaoqing to have the habit of brushing their teeth no matter when and where, even if they were about to go out to fight. The three of them each had a freshly opened toothbrush. Xiaoqing had specially chosen a parent-child set. The one in her hand was for her mother, the one in Little Bun's hand was for the baby, and Dai's was for her father. Even his toothpaste cup was adorable. Little Bun was especially amusing when he was brushing his teeth. He always liked to brush and brush. After brushing for a while, he would take a mouthful of water and rinse his mouth with gurgling sounds. He looked like a little squirrel with a mouthful of pine nuts. Dai followed suit. The two squirrels, one big and one small, played very happily. When Xiaoqing finished rinsing her mouth, the two squirrels were still purring. Then, Dai was slapped on the back by Xiaoqing. He spat out saliva onto Meng Shun's pants. Meng Shun, who was completely passing by and innocently implicated, was speechless. Xiaoqing was a little embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't see you coming. Would you like me to take it off and wash it for you?" Meng Shun saw that the key part of his pants was already wet, and the traces of wetness were still spreading. He was actually having a mental breakdown. He just wanted to get close to her and see if he could get any information related to the water purification. Then he ended up like this. People who didn't know better would think that he had wet his pants. Meng Shun was about to refuse. It was just his pants that were wet. It was too bad of him to let Xiaoqing wash it. Just as he was about to refuse, he suddenly thought that this was also a way to get closer to Xiaoqing. He could take the opportunity to chat with her and become familiar with her. Hence he said, "I don't know how to wash clothes. It's really troublesome." "It's not troublesome." Xiaoqing thought for a while and said, "It will be too troublesome to change your clothes and send them back. I have air dyes clothes in my tent. They are new. I brought them from home. Both of you are about the same height, so you should be able to wear them." Meng Shun considered that he couldn't parade around with his pants wet, so he agreed. He was about the same height as Air Dye, but Air Dye was thinner. Hence Meng Shun looked tighter when he wore Air Dye's clothes. "I will send them to you when they are dry." Xiaoqing pinched Little Bun's cheeks to make him spit out the water. Then she took a tissue and wiped Little Bun's mouth. Chapter 89. Well, I actually came here to ask you if you are interested in settling down in Zhongbei Survivor Base. Zhongbei Survivor Base may not have as good benefits as S-City Survivor Base, and the climate there is also worse than S-City Survivor Base, but Meng Shun hesitated for a long time and found that he could not find an attractive reason. In the end, he could only say dryly, "But I still hope that you can take your team and stay in our Zhongbei Survivor Base." The corner of Xiaoqing's eyes twitched. She had never seen someone persuade others like this. He pointed out the shortcomings of his own base, and in the end he said dryly, "Do you want to come or not? Who would go there?" Moreover, Xiaoqing's savings were all in S-City Survivor Base. Just the food she had saved during these days of missions was enough to make her reluctant to leave. If it was not to the point where she had to move, Xiaoqing would not be ready to leave S-City Survivor Base. Meng Shun also knew that his words were particularly unpersuasive, but he still couldn't help but say, "When we arrive at Zhongbei Survivor Base, I will take you around. The people in our base are very nice. Maybe you will like it." He now felt that he was very useless. When he was with Yan Pingshen, he could make Yan Pingshen unable to say a word. When it came to Xiaoqing, he was so useless. Maybe he really should treat his social difficulties. Although Yan Pingshen always said that he couldn't control himself in front of beauty, he still felt that it was really necessary. Maybe. Xiaoqing was too embarrassed to refuse directly. She said euphemistically, "We are going to have breakfast. Have you eaten? Do you want to join us?" Meng Shun shook his head. "I have eaten. I will go back first. You guys eat." After Meng Shun left, Xiaoqing poured a glass of water for Xiaobao to rinse his mouth. Air Dai was very dissatisfied with Xiaoqing's different treatment. He pouted and showed the circle of foam around his mouth to Xiaoqing, trying to let Xiaoqing wipe it for him. Then Xiaoqing slapped a piece of tissue on his face. Air Dai was speechless. After breakfast, they packed up their tents and other things and continued their journey. According to Yan Pingshen, the way back was much smoother than when they came. At this speed, they would be able to return to the Zhongbei Survivor Base in less than 10 days. Xiaoqing was not as optimistic as him. She looked at the map. The terrain of this area was not flat. There were mountains and hills. After this section of the road, they would arrive at a densely populated area. There would definitely be a lot of zombies. In the wild, they would face many unknown dangers. Otherwise, when Meng Shun and the others came, there would not be so many injured people. So now was not the time to relax. When she was in the S-City Survivor Base, she saw with her own eyes that a group of paranormals was ambushed by a group of ordinary zombies led by a high-level zombie very close to the base. People were like that. When they were at home, they were often the most relaxed. They were very close to the base, so they let their guard down. In the end, they were all wiped out. Naturally, the result was very miserable. After being bitten, paranormals would not become zombies. What awaited them was only to be slowly eaten. This was also a kind of fairness from God. After ordinary people were bitten, they would become zombies. Once paranormals were surrounded by zombies, they would either commit suicide or be eaten. According to this idea, maybe humans turning into zombies was another kind of evolution. Just like how humans evolved into paranormals, God couldn't be too unfair to ordinary people. Therefore, zombies were also evolving, and in the end they might be the pinnacle of a species. Chapter 90. Shaoqing didn't want to remind them. After all, Yan Pingshan and the others must be the elites of a base. If they couldn't even maintain the most basic vigilance, they wouldn't be qualified to be elites and represent a base to do business with another base. After passing through the mountain pass, we will be very close to the town. When we get there, we can enter the town and search. Many rural farmers will grow vegetables in their own homes. Maybe we can find something. Yan Pingshan's off-road vehicle and Shaoqing's car were moving forward. He chatted with Shaoqing for a while. If it was a small team of paranormals carrying enough rations, they wouldn't risk entering a town. But Yan Pingshan's team had a lot of people, so they didn't care about a small town. Shaoqing didn't say anything. She just frowned and looked at the mountain pass in front of them. There was a road here, but it was built by the villagers. It divided the small mountain from the middle. The road was also ordinary cement road. Because it had been in disrepair for a long time, there were cracks everywhere. Fortunately, their off-road vehicle's performance was good. Climbing mountains was not a problem, not to mention such a road. Shaoqing felt that something was wrong. In the middle of the broken road in front of them, there was a pile of straw and other things lying flat on the ground. Moreover, there was a long stretch of the ground covered with wheat stalks. It was as if before doomsday, someone had left the wheat stalks on the ground and no one had taken them away. Speed up a little bit. Yan Pingshan shouted and looked at his watch. Before he could tell Shaoqing the time, the first car fell with the wheat stalks. The car behind didn't stop in time and also fell in. It turned out that under the wheat stalks, there was a very deep pit. It was at least 10 meters deep. Ordinary cars that fell in would never be able to climb out. The third car braked and almost rear-ended it. Because everything happened too quickly, they weren't prepared at all. Everyone be careful. Yan Pingshan's face was very ugly. This big pit was dug by man. It was absolutely not natural. Didn't they see that someone had covered it with wheat stalks? But he didn't think about it. As a result, he was careless and almost lost 2 cars. The car leading the way belonged to the blazing team. Yen Ruru was also very angry. She sent people to rescue the people in the car while being vigilant. No one would dig such a pit for no reason. It must be premeditated. Everyone, please be careful. Yan Pingshan also sent people to rescue people. They were very vigilant, but they didn't know that some people were also very hesitant. This pit was dug by the survivors in the town ahead. Some of the survivors in their town went to the small survivor base nearby. Some of the more capable and brave ones went to the survivor base in S City. The rest of the group who didn't want to be controlled stayed here. There were about 30 people in the group and 80% of them were paranormals. Because this road led to the Zhongbei survivor base, and it was the safest one, they had set up a trap there specifically to trap passing vehicles. When Yan Pingshan and the others came, they took another road so they didn't meet them. When they went back, they chose a safer road. As a result, they met them. This group of people were like bandits. Every day, a few people took turns to watch the big pit below. Once someone fell into the trap, they would call their companions to go down and pick up the meat. This group of people was cruel and merciless. Their principle was to kill the men and leave the women alive. They cut the weeds and the roots to prevent future troubles. Often, when people fell into the trap, the men were made into jerky and stored as food, and the women were raped and kept in captivity to play with. This group of people was also very smart. If they encountered a large number of paranormals, they wouldn't come out and let the other party leave. So until now they had been very safe in this area. But this time they met Yan Pingshan's team. There were nearly 30 people in Yan Pingshan's team. Even if only half of them were paranormals, they were still a tough stubble. Generally, in this kind of situation they wouldn't come out. They would wait for Yan Pingshan and the others to leave, then they would set up the trap again and wait for the next prey. However, it was different this time. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the carriages in the middle were filled with goods. Although they were covered with tarpaulins and couldn't see what the goods were, there were only two kinds of things that required so many carriages to transport. The first was food and the second was fuel. It could also be all kinds of materials. In short, they were what they needed. If they did this, they wouldn't have to worry about food for the next 1 or 2 years. It was really a great temptation. But the number of people made them hesitate. The person in charge of the patrol gritted his teeth and said to his companion, "They can't move the cars out of the pit in a short time. You go and inform our boss that there is a big fat sheep coming. There are nearly 30 people, and the number of paranormals is unknown. They are transporting about 10 cars full of supplies. Ask our boss if he wants to do it." The companion nodded and went quietly. Their camp was nearby, built around the town. It didn't take much time for them to go back and forth, not to mention that he was a speed paranormal. He found the leader who was still on the woman's belly and said breathlessly at the door, "Boss, we met a fat sheep. This time it's really a fat sheep. Should we do it?" A woman's shoe flew out and hit him in the face. "Get the hell out of here. You almost scared me." If you have something to say it quickly. If you can't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I will cut off your leg and pickle it. Chapter 91. This piece of fat meat was really too big. After listening to the subordinate, the leader pulled up his pants and gathered all his subordinates to go over. When they arrived, they saw that there were indeed 10 full cars. The ruts along the way were so deep, which meant that there must be a lot of things in the cars and they were very heavy. There was a 50% chance that it was food, and a 50% chance that it was oil. The leader couldn't hold it in anymore. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Where's the second brother?" A skinny man with blue skin came over. "Big brother, I'm here. We're in the upper hand now. Do you have the confidence to take down half of them without being discovered?" The leader said gloomily, "I can try." The second brother calculated for a moment, then said, "As long as there's no wood-type healer among them, it won't be a problem to take down half of them." There were generally 2 types of wood-type paranormals. One was healing and assisting. That was to say, when such paranormals subdued their own plants, they would try their best to choose those that could heal and enhance their teammates. Of course, they would have the basic ability to protect themselves. The second type was controlling and assisting. For example, Shaoqing's vines and some wood-type paranormals plants could release some toxins to weaken the enemy. This type of paranormals was mainly controlling. Shaoqing was a controlling and assisting assault-type paranormals. Usually, she could also assist her teammates. At a critical moment, she could become an assault-type paranormals in a second, controlling and assisting herself. Hearing this, the leader made up his mind. "Gather, gather. Take down this fat sheep. Everyone will get an extra bag of food. When we go back tonight, we can play with all the women at home." Although they didn't dare to cheer for fear of being discovered by Shaoqing and the others, everyone's face was full of excitement. Usually, they didn't have the chance to play with women. After all, there were very few women, and they usually didn't get a chance to play with them. Therefore, everyone had been in love with their left and right hands for a long time. Now they were all staring at Shaoqing and the others with shining eyes. The second brother smiled wretchedly while pointing at Shaoqing and Yen Ruru. "Big brother, don't hurt those 2 beauties. Let's have a threesome tonight." The leader waved his hand and said, "If you can take them all down, I'll let you have a taste tonight." OL second rubbed his hands and walked towards the wind tunnel. When he reached the wind tunnel, he smiled coldly and activated his ability. His ability was poison. When he first awakened it, it was mainly used to paralyze people. When he reached level 2, he had an additional type of poison that could paralyze people. Usually, when he encountered a large number of fat sheep, he would release the poison first. When those people were either paralyzed or unconscious, the others would rush forward and tie them up. Therefore, the leader valued him very much and gave him a lot of zombie crystal nuclei. hoping that he could reach level 3 as soon as possible. After all, when he was at level 2, he could only poison people who were above level 2. For paranormals who were above level 2, the effect of his poison was very small. If OL2 could reach level 3 with his special ability, he would be invincible. The colorless poison with a faint fragrance blended into the wind and slowly drifted to Xiaoqing and the others. Yin Pingshen and Yin Ruru had just rescued people from the car and were commanding several strength-based paranormals to drag the car out. Xiaoqing smelled a faint fragrance. Since her sense of taste and pain had been reduced to a very low level, her sense of smell and hearing had become particularly sensitive. More importantly, when she smelled that fragrance, the wood energy automatically circulated in her body, as if it was cleaning something. Chapter 92. At that moment Xiaoqing understood. She hurriedly called out to the others, "Hold your breath. There's poison in the wind." Xiaoqing's words were timely, but some people were still poisoned. Those who were poisoned were all second-level paranormals and below. People like Yen Ruru only felt a little dizzy at most, because the poison couldn't enter her body at all. Even if some poison entered her body, it would be quickly removed by Yen Ruru's energy. Another example was Xiao Tong. She had the habit of setting up a simple spirit shield around her at all times, so the poison would be removed as soon as it touched the shield. It couldn't hurt Xiao Tong at all. Moreover, some paranormals who were at the peak of second level and not far from third level were also not affected. They could be removed in a short while. However, those who were hiding in the dark didn't know that. They only saw a large number of people fall down. The leader suddenly became excited, as if the fat sheep had already entered his pocket. "Brothers, let's go. Capture the women alive and don't leave the men alive." A group of people rushed down. Yin Ruru was very calm. She ordered the rest of the people to move the poisoned ones back. If they were accidentally hurt during the fight, they would have nowhere to cry. Xiaoqing also saw Yin Ruru's thoughts. She stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" "Little girl, is there something wrong with your brain?" "I'm your husband." The leader laughed lewdly and said, "Didn't we sleep together last night? You don't recognize me now after putting on your pants?" Xiaoqing's eyes immediately became cold. Dai was about to rush out and attack, but he was stopped by Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing smiled faintly. "What did you just say? I didn't hear you clearly." "I said I'm your husband and I also like the little girl behind you. How about you serve me tonight? She's so young." "Second brother, don't you think they look like mother and son?" How could the leader be afraid of Xiaoqing? There were only 10 people on her side, but they had nearly 30 people on their side, and all of them were paranormals. Second brother immediately chimed in. "To be able to fuck a mother and daughter, boss, your luck with women isn't shallow. How about you let me have the hot chick next to you?" "No problem, we brothers should share our blessings." The leader laughed. Xiaoqing looked at Yen Ruru, and then looked at the captain of Meng Shan's team. Although she was asking, her tone was very cold. "How about leaving the two of them to me?" Yen Ruru's weapon was a whip. It was made of the spine of a mutated tiger and had been specially processed. She didn't ask Xiaoqing if she could use it. She just said, "Lend me that ice element guy over there. I'll get rid of all the troublesome minions for you." The other captain also nodded. "Do what you can. Be careful. If you can't do it, call us for help." Hearing this, the leader laughed and immediately waved his hand. "Brothers, they look down on us. Come on, let's fight together. Let's end this quickly. Kill all the men and bring the women back so that everyone can have some fun." Those who were temporarily paralyzed were dragged to the back. Without any consideration, no one would talk nonsense with them. Xiaoqing let Yan Hanqing and the others choose to kill those who were not pleasing to the eye, while she faced the leader and second brother. Xiaoqing's eyes were filled with killing intent that was about to explode. She stretched out her hand, and green vines shot towards the two men. The second brother's first reaction was to hide behind the leader and release the poison. His poison was too disgusting. Although it wouldn't harm people's lives, it made people unable to move freely. The leader hurriedly used his power. His power was the same as Yen Ruru's, which was fire. The difference was that he was a little weaker than Yen Ruru. Chapter 93. As soon as the flames touched the vines, black smoke floated up. The poison on the surface of the vines was evaporated by the flames. When the leader saw the black smoke, he was shocked. He hurriedly formed a fire shield in front of him, but the vines with black smoke went around him. Then a scream came from behind him. When the leader turned around, his face was splashed with blood. Those vines were like sharp cones, easily piercing the second brother's body. Some pierced his stomach, some pierced his chest, and some pierced his neck. Then, in the next second, the second brother's body was torn apart by the waving vines. Only his head was intact. It rolled around on the ground, then stopped moving toward the leader. The second brother's face was still a bit lustful. Until he died, he didn't realize how he died. He was still immersed in the illusion of victory. His limbs, flesh, and internal organs were scattered everywhere along with his body. The leader wiped his face and his hand was stained with blood and minced meat. There was also a piece of internal organ that he couldn't tell which organ it was. The warm blood splashed into his eyes and mouth. In an instant he realized that this time he seemed to have provoked someone he shouldn't have. Especially when he saw Yen Ru and the others slaughtering his subordinates one-sidedly even though they had fewer people. The leader wanted to run away at that moment. After all, his brothers had lost everything, and his subordinates had lost everything. He could still find another one, and there was still a chance for him to make a comeback. After all, he was already a level 3 paranormal, but what if he died? If he died, he would have nothing left. But would Xiao Qing let him run away? Seeing him release a fire shield to stop the vines from getting closer and sneakily look around to escape, Xiao Qing sneered. Little Tong. Xiao Tong immediately released her power. When Xiao Tong was a level 1 paranormal, she could only release a shield to protect herself and her companions. This was probably because she had been beaten and scolded since she was young, which caused her to have an extreme desire for a sense of security. That was why this ability appeared when she awakened. When she reached level 2, Xiao Tong's biggest desire was to help Xiao Qing instead of feeling safe. Thus she gained a second ability, which also gave her the ability to attack. The invisible spiritual power hit the leader's head in an instant. When Xiao Tong was a little stronger, she could even use this ability to blow up other people's heads invisibly. Unfortunately, she was still a little weak now. All she could do was make the leader feel a sharp pain in his head and temporarily lose his consciousness. That was enough. In an instant, the dense fire shields around the leader dissipated along with his spirit. The vines took advantage of this opportunity to invade. Although the leader had already woken up at this time, it was already too late. The vines had already wrapped around his neck and limbs. The leader hurriedly released flames to burn the vines, but the paralyzing and corrosive poison had already entered his body through the thorns on the vines. As the poison spread, the flames became weaker and weaker. The vines also slowly tightened, strangling him to the point that his tongue was about to be stuck out. Let me go. I know I was wrong. The leader rolled his eyes as he was strangled. He said intermittently, I saved a lot of food and money and crystal nuclei. I'll give them all to you. I'll tell you where those things are. Don't kill me. Yen Pingshan also walked over. Qing let him live first. Then Yen Pingshan saw the vines suddenly tighten, and the thorns instantly lengthened, piercing into the leader's neck. Even though he was so far away, Yen Pingshan could hear the sound of bones breaking. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.